can't sleep at night. My mind just keeps me up. My mind just keeps me up. Oh, I wonder why. No, faith is not enough. No, faith is not enough. Oh, my fears come back to you. What do I do when I'm losing you? Oh, my fears come back to you. What do I do when I'm losing you? I have no options left. I must be moving on. I must be moving on. There is no hope left. I must be letting go. I must be letting
And that was Faith Is Not Enough by Steak Fry. If you guys are interested in them, please check out Steak Fry on Bandcamp. They're a phenomenal band. And tonight on Radio Graffiti, we have very special guests, NEAL, aka NDASFW. Welcome to the show, NEAL.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. This is your second ever podcast from last we discussed before the show. Yeah.
Yeah, the last podcast I was on was a NSFW art related one. So
Yeah, you can give them a quick shout out right now, just to.
yeah, they're called the Lewd Front. They're on YouTube. It's hosted by Oiled and Shiro. It's a really chill podcast. It's fun to listen to.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in Neil's more not safe for work discussions, go check that podcast out. It's a very fun show. And if you guys can't make it throughout the whole show tonight, we are going to re-upload this on YouTube and on Newgrounds later on. But yeah, Neil, if you guys haven't known, is a artist on Twitter, and well, not just Twitter. I mean, I think Twitter and Instagram are your biggest platforms.
Twitter, like, by far is like the biggest platform I've ever had, and I've been posting art to the internet since I was like 13 years old. So long time ago.
Do you remember what platforms you've jumped between?
Oh God. I first joined on DeviantArt, where most of us start out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was on there for a good probably at least like 10 or 12 years, posting mostly like monster artwork. Then everyone knows DeviantArt's reputation. There's a lot of strange people on there, and kind of the standard.
The front page of DeviantArt is definitely something else. At least back in the day. I don't know what it's like right now.
Oh, God. Whenever I find myself like randomly logging into DeviantArt now, just to like for shits and giggles, it's like the layout is so bad. Like I can't use that site or navigate it anymore. It's terrible.
Yeah. And just to give a quick shout out, Neil is also on Newgrounds, talking about sites with a good layout and fundamental structure.
Mm-hmm. But some quality control too.
Oh yeah, Newgrounds is
not have.
Yeah, Newgrounds is very curated, at least in the front page level. Newgrounds does have a bot that just puts whatever's the most popular thing on there that's not A-rated.
Okay.
Up on the front, like what's the most viewed thing of the day, and that's essentially how Newgrounds is run. There's the featured art, which is curated by mods and admins on the site. featured movies, music, and then you can set up your own feed, which they're starting to like, invest more into.
Gotcha.
So
It's really cool to see the fact that like Newgrounds has like stood the test of time like this. It's pretty insane.
ever since I think 1996, 1999 was when Newgrounds was Newgrounds proper, but like since 96 the site was like starting. And
Wow. Yeah.
testament to Tom Fulp for standing the test of time.
Like it's like amazing too how it's like Newgrounds is also like in so many ways like proto YouTube. Like without Newgrounds having like some of the the most famous memes of all time. Like
Yeah,
and those are some of the first videos uploaded to YouTube too.
it's funny because I was actually thinking about this earlier today. Why Newgrounds was really big back in the day, because Swifts, and for anybody listening, Swifts are I forget the Shockwave Flash files, and they are very light files to work in. And most websites back in the day, when you installed Macromedia Flash on your computer, which was this like plugin that every browser had, they run Swift files, and they run relatively quickly because like videos were not a thing. Like video files were huge, and dial-up, like on computers, could not handle like larger video files.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. Well, it's like I remember as like oh god, like as a 10-year-old going to sites and finding video files, like it'd be like the intro cinematic to like Smash Bros. Melee.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, I want that. I want to download it. And it's like it was maybe a 15 megabyte like MPEG file, and it took like 6 hours to download. It was horrible.
Yeah, and like like kids nowadays especially would not know or would not understand like what videos were like back in the day. Like when you
Oh,
waited for a
yeah,
video
no.
to load up, you had to do something else.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's like just waiting like 10 minutes just for the little buffer bar to move like 2 millimeters, and you're like, oh my god, I see a new frame now.
Yeah, and this is why like Newgrounds was really big back in the day, or stuff like E-Bombs World, if anyone remembers
Oh,
E-Bombs
I
World.
remember. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but those sites were popular because they had flash games and flash movies that could just play relatively quickly. They load within like 2 minutes. Nowadays, like we think about waiting 2 minutes for something to load, and it's just like, oh man, why would it take so long?
Like that's not worth it. That's not worth the wait.
Yeah, I remember the Impossible quiz on like
Oh yeah.
Mo Fun Zone, I think was the name of the website.
There was so many like mirrors to games like that. Like I remember going to like addictinggames.com
Addictinggames.com, yeah.
which like they updated every Friday, and you're like where you'd play like mostly shitty games and then find one that was fun.
Yeah, no, but when you were like a kid back in the days, just like what else did you have, right? You didn't have Steam, you didn't have like a Switch where you can download games. You had like your video store where you rented games.
Yeah, and it wasn't until like years later where like maybe I was in middle school or early high school where I learned how to actually like emulate games. So it's like I was at the mercy of like Cartoon Network Shockwave games and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, back when everyone was just making Flash content, and Flash just died over the years because like the internet has become more optimized, and we've sort of evolved past the need for Flash. But there was a point where Flash was like the most important thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For
it's like it's honestly kind of like shocking when they were like, we're retiring this, and I'm like, what? Like, won't that cause like the entire internet to just like go up in flames?
Yeah, like I remember Newgrounds was struggling for a little bit at the time because as Flash was being phased out, because it didn't happen overnight, they gave people like a buffer period to like restructure their websites if they needed to. And Newgrounds, Tom Fulp especially, he invested a lot in Ruffle, which is a browser-based Flash emulator, like a Macromedia Flash emulator, and that's what a lot of things on Newgrounds are running off of. Like
Gotcha.
old Flash content is running off of Ruffle,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that was a gargantuan effort.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sounds
now
like it.
everything is like pretty much archived relatively well.
All those important dress-up games.
The dress-up games from back in the day. I'm trying to remember. There was one like Roll from Mega Man Legends. There was a
Mm-hmm.
dress-up game for that. Like, okay, this is the one thing about Newgrounds that I do miss. Newgrounds used to have portals. We still have like
Mm-hmm.
portals in name currently right now, but back in the day they used to have like a Naruto portal, a Mega Man portal, Sonic
Oh,
portal,
yep. I remember that now. Yep.
and it's just not. I mean, I think Newgrounds is better right now in terms of discovering new artists because like back in
Oh,
the
yeah.
day you just search whatever like thing you were into, like whatever show you were into, and you could find a bunch of Newgrounds parodies. But now you can just find things made by artists specifically.
Well, it's like the internet back then was just not like creator centric. It just like wasn't really a thing yet. Like even though Newgrounds like paved the way for that probably more than any other website I can think of, it still wasn't like you didn't really think of people as like, oh, I'm gonna watch for that creator's content.
Yeah, no, that was a shift that happened. I think like because kids back then they didn't really care. Okay, a majority of the people that were using the internet of that era were like middle schoolers to tweens to teens,
Yeah.
and they didn't really have an understanding of people were the ones making this thing. It was more of the idea of, hey, is this parody that exists of this thing? And like, you know, it's like how you think about like watching a TV show as a kid. You don't think about the people that made the show. You just think about the show itself.
Right. But yeah, no, it's like talking about this like early internet stuff is so much fun because it's like it might be like the most nostalgic like part of my brain is thinking about like what were the first things I did once like I was allowed to go on the internet, you know? And like that's like where I formed like my most like formative interests over the years. Like I think like one of the first websites I stumbled across because I really loved playing like Street Fighter 2 at my cousin's house. I was like, oh, I want to look up Street Fighter 2 stuff, but then I came across this huge website of like this giant like fighting game character like dictionary. I'm like, oh my god, there's more characters in Street Fighter than just those 8 in Street Fighter 2.
That's
Which like now it's like Street Fighter 3 and all those games are like some like biggest like artistic influences and have stayed that way for like 20 years.
oh yeah, no, I could definitely see a lot of Street Fighter, especially 3 in your work, especially with the way how you draw like the figure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man, like Capcom was like tops, man. Like no one could beat their art department, at least like in the 90s. Like they were just on a whole level of their own.
Capcom, the arcade scene, it's either Capcom or Sega. They both had two extremely strong art departments. Sega was very experimental with the new age type of stuff, but Capcom was very artistically driven in terms of like, you know, Udon or who are other like big name Capcom artists?
Oh, I mean, like there's like there's that like Ackerman who's like the I know he like designed like Chun Li, but he was like their chief character designer, and he also was like built the basis for what like Capcom anatomy looks like or whatever. He was just like their style guide was based on their one like their first like in-house illustrator.
And they set a standard pretty much for that like genre essentially.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I still think like to this day they're like unbeatable. Like I still think like Street Fighter 3 is like the peak cast of like character designs in a fighting game. Like even though it's like I I have a lot of friends who love fighting games, and they're always like tweeting stuff out about like Guilty Gear and Tekken and stuff. And like, even though those characters still look cool, it's just like you'll never beat like Street Fighter 3 or Darkstalkers. Just
Darkstalker character design is just really, really good. But no,
oh,
yeah, Street Fighter 3, I remember that was the first fighting game I got really, I delved into. And the entire
I
cast
can't
looked
play it
so
for
good.
shit.
Oh, damn. But like the entire cast looked so good. I had a
Mhm.
hard time picking a favorite character because everyone moves so like they have a
yeah.
unique style to them.
Well, it's like you take a character like Hugo, you know, the big like
Yep.
8 foot tall Andre the Giant looking guy. It's like he's probably like one of the characters who's like designed to be like he's ugly. You know, he's like this big monster man pretty much. But he is like animated beautifully. Like might be like the most beautifully animated character in the game. It's like they just that amount of attention they put into every one of their characters, even if they were these weird oddball characters. That's like why I've always gravitated. Like my favorite character is that Necro, who's like the replacement for Dalsim.
Yeah, Necro was a lot of fun too.
Oh,
I also
love
liked
his design.
the way how the victory screens, where like the other characters come into frame, especially for Necro. There's also, for me, my personal favorite in Street Fighter 3 in terms of like movement was Q, because Q was very
Q's
unlike
awesome.
every other character in that game, where he has like this very robotic movement that he's pushed.
It's like very, very deliberate
Yeah.
kind of movement. Yeah.
And he
Like
was
very slow, but he could pack a punch.
Yeah. The art was also phenomenal. There's another artist on Twitter lately. I need to remember his name. He's been doing very badass Street Fighter art and like SNK art. And he has commissions open. I think I retweeted his commission page a little while back. I'll be hunting that down while we're talking at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Capcom back in the day. I can definitely say Capcom's been an influence for me too, artistically speaking, because Beautiful Joe was one of my favorite games of all. Well, it is my favorite game of all time.
Oh yeah, the art for that is incredible. Like I've never played Beautiful Joe, but I was like watching a friend play it recently, and it's just what's the alligator guy? What's his name?
It was, oh man, I'm blanking out on it right now.
It's like it's such a ridiculous sounding name, but you're just like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, you're looking it up right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna look him up.
Why am I blanking on it? So it's Charles III was the first boss. That was the bat, and then Grand Brutes was the shark. Hulk Davidson. Okay, I need to list them off based off of what I remembered.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the name. Yep.
Yeah, Hulk Davidson. Yeah, Hulk Davidson the house. Yeah, okay, that's why I remember.
Yeah, like my friend showed me that cutscene. I'm just like, I do need to play this like as soon as I can.
Beautiful Joe was a very, very fun game. I highly recommend anybody playing it. It's for anybody listening, Beautiful Joe is an action platformer by Capcom from way back in the day. It was released on GameCube and PS2 by Hideki Kamiya.
Mm-hmm. Well, but it's also like a great evolution of like, because it's like you go way back into Capcom's history, and like, are you familiar with like Final Fight?
Yeah, love Final Fight.
Yeah, it's like Final Fight was like their big game to be like, oh, this kind of put us on the map. Because I know that their MO with Final Fight was, it started off Capcom's like method of, let's just look at and rip off American action movies for everything.
Yeah, and
it worked, and it's like they're like that's, and then Final Fight kind of also like morphed into Street Fighter 2, which is of course like their probably highest selling game ever, or like one of them.
I really like that analogy of not analogy, but like Capcom's design ethos of ripping off American action movies. because you can also see that like predominantly within Resident Evil.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Well, it's like even in the original Resident Evil 2 for the PlayStation 1, like the intro cutscenes. If it's I can't remember if it's the intro cutscene or the like end cutscene, but there's this like big giant explosion with like an 18-wheeler semi truck.
Oh, like Die Hard,
And
essentially.
well, like I think they took it shot for shot. They ripped off a scene from Terminator 2. Like they're just like,
Yeah,
let's just
yeah.
take that scene. You're like, it works. Was it that analogy of great artists steal or whatever? It's like,
Pretty much, Capcom is filled with movie buffs, from what I
oh
know.
yeah, movie
Uh,
buffs and anime buffs for sure.
yeah, I know Kamiya loves Tokusatsu, which is like Kamen Rider, Super
Oh yeah,
Sentai,
but with
but
like a large amount of like self-awareness for how
yeah,
like goofy it is.
Kamiya also loves like action movies. If you ever played Beautiful Joe Double Trouble on the DS, there's a RoboCop reference. Like the first boss in that game is essentially RoboCop. Like after you
Oh
beat that section of the game, and it's just like these guys love movies, and that's why I kind of like their games, because like I feel very similarly with
oh yeah.
my love
Hmm.
of film and cinema,
Right,
and
right, same here.
they wear it on their sleeves. I did want to like segue a bit into Resident Evil more, because those
Oh
games,
yeah. Hmm.
I feel like they're a good glimpse of the era. Like every single Resident Evil game, even like up to like the most modern ones, 8
Hmm.
and 4 remake, but they're a good indicator of like what's popular in action movies at the time, and especially the way how the camera is handled.
Right. Hmm.
Because Resident Evil 1 and 2 have more, again, the fixed camera angles, which a lot of movies at the time had in every single movie.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it was also like definitely the more like those original Resident Evil games are definitely a lot more steeped in like traditional survival horror. So it's like those camera angles are really important to like the director had complete control over what you could see and couldn't see.
Yeah, and especially the action zombie horror like element. I think like 28 Days Later, when did that come out?
Oh, I think that was like 2002 something, like early 2000s, I think.
I think 28 Days Later, yeah, that was a 2002 film. Yeah, you're right.
Hmm.
What am I thinking of that came out like a little bit before then?
As far as like zombie movies go,
Yeah.
hmm, because that's the big like 'cause that's the big one I can think of. Because zombie movies are this kind of like I love horror movies, but most zombie movies I don't really care for. So I'm not like
A
the
lot of
biggest
zombie
movie.
movies tend to be very campy, and I think that's what like Resident Evil picked up on, since
Oh
way
yeah,
way back in the day.
but it's like there's never this kind of like winking like lampshadiness to it. Like they are completely earnest,
No,
which I
that's what
I
I
love.
appreciate, because I think what really makes, because a lot of people like, what was that game that came out recently, Forspoken, or
Oh god, yeah, yeah.
where
The
everyone was complaining
cringy dialogue.
about their dialogue, but
Hmm.
like the dialogue for Forspoken was very kind of self-aware,
Yeah, too
and
self-aware.
it didn't like respect itself. It was
No.
like, yeah, we're in a game, or yeah, I did that. But in Resident Evil, everything's ridiculous throughout that
Oh
entire
yeah.
franchise,
Well, and even
and the
though
characters
it's
treat it seriously. But yeah, go on.
yeah. Oh, just like even though like I think the series has had the kind of some hiccups, especially in the past like 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, because like one thing that irritated me a lot about the development of Resident Evil 2 remake was the development team apparently was like arguing and wasting a lot of time and money about like including certain things from the original. And it was usually on the basis of I think that's too goofy. And you're like, what do you like? It's Resident Evil. Everything's goofy. Like, why would you get rid of that because it's too goofy?
I can sense that actually based off what I remember playing for Resident Evil 2 remake, where it felt like it was a bit subdued. It didn't really want to be like
Yeah,
embracing Resident Evil that much until it gets to the very end where it gets kind of nutty.
right. Well, and it's like that one's a weird game because I think Resident Evil 2 remake design wise, like level design, might be like the best game in the series. Like I think the RPD in that, or the
Oh yeah,
Raccoon
no, yeah, the
Police
Raccoon City
Department,
Police Department, yeah.
is like it's phenomenally designed and it's like better than the original. But meanwhile, that kind of like lack of Capcom charm is just like really does not do the game favors. Although it's like what I was gonna say too, though, was even that game though, there's still these like shades of goofiness. Like there's one part where Leon is like coming back into the police station after being outside, and he calls zombies zombies. I'm
Yeah,
just like, thank you. Like I hate when they're like, let's call them clickers or walkers or whatever. You're just like, just call them zombies. Like
yeah.
everyone knows what a zombie is. Like,
Again,
uh,
it's them not treating the story too seriously,
mhm.
and I really appreciate. And Resident Evil 4 remake, I love this game. It's a very good remake because it captures the same
Oh yeah.
feeling. Cause like I was thinking about Resident Evil 4 remake when they announced it. I was thinking to myself, how do you remake Resident Evil 4? Does this game
Oh,
even
I
need a
know.
remake?
Well,
That's
no, it didn't, and it still doesn't.
yeah, it
Like
doesn't.
I still think the original holds up incredibly well, and I still argue that the original is a. I think it's a better game, but the remake is a very good remake.
Yeah, I feel the original is a better action game. That's where my opinion stands.
Okay, yeah,
But
that's completely fair.
but as a survival horror game, I really appreciate the remake for things that it did.
Oh yeah, it definitely like upped the horror element, and I think it did that aspect like really well. I
But
think if there's like anything like I prefer about the original as far as like the gameplay, I think it's like the original 4 is kind of like a hard game to go back to, especially for someone who hasn't like played it ever,
mhm, mhm.
because it's like the lack of like you know how it's like you have to zoom in to aim, but you can't like walk and aim.
Yeah,
But
it
a
was
lot of
very
people,
deliberate.
yeah, a lot of people are gonna find that difficult to adjust to. But I do think like that game is just like better built around its limitations. Like it works perfectly. Whereas it's like there were some moments in 4 remake where it's like you would kind of get like chain locked into like this zombie's grabbing you and then you
Oh,
let
the
go
grabbers in 4
and then
remake,
some
yeah.
other zombie like throws a hatchet at you, but you're still in like the middle of your animation where you're recovering and you're just like I it's impossible to avoid sometimes. Whereas like stuff like that didn't really happen in the original, but it's very nitpicky, but it's still like I think the original is the best one.
Yeah. My biggest fear going into Resident Evil 4 as a remake, because I did play through 2 remake, and 2 remake did feel a little bit too serious for
Hmm.
Resident
I
Evil, and
agree.
I was worried about 4 remake because I was like, okay, Resident Evil 4 is a ridiculous game. This game is actually goofy. It's
Oh,
all the way through.
incredibly. Hmm.
And they did a really good job, I feel, for Resident Evil 4 remake keeping that level of camp. It's not as
Oh
crazy as
yeah.
the original, but for general audiences, like it would pull them way too far away. But I feel like they found a very good middle ground for everything
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
good camp and good horror.
Well, that's like, but I think the thing that was the most like surprising about the remake in a really good way was how much like certain dramatic moments like really worked.
Yeah, Luis.
Like,
Luis
like
has improved
Luis
dramatically
is
as a character.
amazing.
Yeah.
But then even like the fight with like Leon and Krauser, like the way that ends, you're just like, wow, this is actually like emotional and it works.
I think
Like I
what
know that a lot of people prefer the original Krauser, and it usually comes down to his voice. But like I felt like the I don't know, like the implied like history and relationship between Leanne and Krauser was way better done in this game.
Yeah, the what helps a lot with that, especially in 4 remake, 2 remake also did this too, where they put a lot of notes throughout the whole game.
Hmm.
I think they've been taking notes from Resident Evil 8 and putting a lot of story and narrative within the actual notes scattered around the area so you can piece together the larger story of Resident
Hmm.
Evil. And that's where I give a lot of kudos to Resident Evil 7 and 8 because they've done great things with the narrative for the series that it really needed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, like 8. I'm probably not gonna. I don't want to get too much into the weeds there. Like I do like that method of storytelling, like because it's like very, it reminds me of like From Software or like Metroid Prime, where it's like all this optional story is like hidden in the game.
right.
But yeah, Village's story itself was very iffy to me. And it's mainly just dealing with like certain characters not making any sense to me. But like, I did
Uh
overall enjoy that game.
yeah. I really like Village. I do feel like Ethan's just got the short end of the stick throughout that whole
Oh,
narrative. And
oh,
I just felt so
absolutely.
bad for him throughout the whole game. But
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think Ethan's probably the character I have the least problem with. It's just like characters like Chris in that game are just like he's kind of stupid in that game.
yeah, Chris could have
Like why?
solved all this by just explaining things to Ethan right
Yeah,
then and
yeah,
there, and he
exactly.
chose not to. And I'm just like, why did you want to make Chris look like such a bad guy? And
Mhm.
he's had multiple moments throughout the game to explain things to Ethan.
Well, it's like there's a part in the game where I think it's when you get to what's his name, Moreau, the fish guy.
Yeah,
When you're in his domain, and there's like this cutscene with Chris, and Chris is like standing there with his arms crossed against a wall, and he's like, "Didn't think you'd make it this far," and you're like, "Why are you being an asshole right now, Chris? Like,
yeah.
why are you acting like this?" Like they were
But I
so I don't know why they were trying so hard to make him a red herring because it's just like that's where it kind of fell apart for me. But
yeah. I mean, you say that, but like, I also found it very funny because I like thinking about Chris like that, where he's just kind of dumb.
yeah.
Because he's been like, I mean, like, he's kind of been a beefhead throughout the
Oh yeah.
franchise.
Well, especially once he punched a boulder in 5,
Yeah,
that joke will never go away.
they reference it within 8 itself.
Oh yeah. Well, Heisenberg. Heisenberg
Heisenberg,
is like my favorite character in that
same here.
game. He is
He
like the biggest ham. It's amazing.
and like his voice is like really good too. It's just this weird mix of like uh Nicolas Cage and
Yeah, Nick Cage is the big one that comes to mind.
yeah,
Like, because it's like you can't quite tell what his accent is, but it's like he has this really weird affectation that's just like perfect for that character. Like he sounds like sort of pompous, well, really pompous, honestly. But like, I don't know, I don't know. I
he
just love Heisenberg.
he has these particularities to him that make him very funny and very engaging to listen to. He
Hmm.
carries the
Hmm.
scene whenever he's in the moment.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah,
I think like the weirdest thing to me about Village overall as a game is like, but I also like I understand why it's so popular. Is like it probably more than any other Resident Evil game, it feels like a greatest hits collection, but like into a really abbreviated game.
I
It's
can
like
feel
we
that.
have
Yeah,
it's like we have our traditional like maze like structure of like the original Resident Evil games. It's like you can see that kind of in like Lady D's castle or like
yeah,
even the village itself. But then meanwhile, it's like the dollhouse. Angie, I think is that character's name.
yeah.
Um, it's like
Donna
this is
is the
them
name of
trying to,
the person that controls
yeah,
the doll. Yeah, Angie's the doll.
Beneviento. That's what it was. House Beneviento. It's like that segment's clearly their attempt at like, okay, we're gonna try and capitalize on like Silent Hill PT, but also like 7 trying to just be more like overtly creepy.
Yeah, the
But then
video
like
sections in 7.
Right. But then like Heisenberg and his factory is just like this is full on just like stupid action, like ridiculousness that's like from 5 and 4 and 6.
It was
I
also,
loved the look of that factory though.
yeah.
It's such a cool looking area.
I, that game also was the first game that I started to speedrun more actively, Resident Evil 8.
Mm-hmm.
Because it
Mm-hmm.
was just very fun to just blast through once you know everything and how to do everything. I still remember, like, I have Mia and Ethan's date, like, of their marriage date, like, stuck to my
Mm-hmm.
brain, May 15th.
Oh yeah, same.
Just
Right, I
because
did
of,
for a while at least. Yeah.
yeah, because I was just stuck playing through that, like, part of the game, like, constantly.
Well, it's like
And
I kind of got down to like speed running Resident Evil 3 remake, even though it's not a good game. I think it was like I think it came out during COVID, so it was just like I have nothing better to do. I'm gonna just complete this game. And so I got so used to playing it that I could just beat it so quick.
yeah, for me, Resident Evil 8, that was my COVID game. So that's why I
Mm,
was like speedrunning that game. That's when I was like trying to stream more because I was not actively going outside of the house. I was not working.
right, right.
So I was just trying to do other things to keep myself engaged or like talk with other people.
To stave off the cabin fever. Hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of, okay, we can move on from the Resident Evil talk and talk more about life as an artist, as specifically for you. Well, me too, but life as an
Hmm.
artist pre-COVID and now, like pandemic.
Um, it's like I think the weird thing is that like I don't think my process or experience changed that much during COVID as an artist, just because it's like I've always been freelancing. Like,
Got you, got you.
so it's like I've always been stuck in my house pretty much. But honestly, I feel like during COVID, I actually got like increased business, probably because there's just more people online all the time. Probably
Yeah.
like a lot more people, like, because it's like a bulk of my commissions I get are all people wanting me to draw their like Final Fantasy 14 characters that they've made.
Oh, nice.
And it's like I'm sure a bunch of them are like probably played a shit ton of it during COVID, and they're like, "Oh, I want a commission of them now." Or like
Yeah.
D&D characters too, like same thing.
I for me myself, in terms of commission work, I've definitely picked up a lot of more commission work throughout the pandemic.
Hmm.
Again, I think for a similar reason because a lot of people were just online more often, and people were just kind of stuck without anything really to do.
Right, right.
So when they have the means to, they just commission because art's a nice way to just get some joy out of the world.
Oh,
And
for
why
sure.
people want to commission somebody, it's just because like, hey, there's like things are kind of dire out there, and I just want something that will give me some comfort. And like my characters that
Mhm.
I've like developed throughout this time, I want them to bring that comfort to me. But for me,
Oh yeah.
I've done a lot of studio stuff prior
Mm.
COVID, and then after everything, it's just I don't know. I kind of miss going outside of the house.
Yeah, I think like I'm getting to a point where like because like I've never been like I've always been a freelancer, so I've never really done much studio work. Like I've had like some like temp gigs here and there, but like nothing major or anything. Like usually like very very local stuff. Um, but I think like now I'm hitting a point where I'm like I kind of want to start reaching out to like bigger potential clients and then working on personal projects, seeing where those go.
Yeah. Speaking of personal projects, I know we've talked about it before, but you're thinking about starting something for yourself, a comic series, I think you said.
Yeah, at least like right now, it's planned as just like one graphic novel, and then maybe like a I guess like a supplementary book of like who's who kind of dictionary of characters kind of thing. But yeah, no, like a year or two ago, I was I was really high, and I was just like I had never like painted digitally while I was like high, so I'm like I'm just gonna see what happens.
Okay.
And I made this like really goofy character. It was like this weird golem sci-fi character, but then I like stuck a duck head on him, and I'm like, oh, I love this. This is just so stupid, goofy, but like kind of cool. And I kind of like shelved that character for like over a year. But then recently, I was like doing some other painting that actually started out as a commission. So I had to shout out that commissioner. It like he wanted it a certain way, but then I kind of veered off in this like really weird direction, and I felt bad. Like, oh, this is no longer like representing the commission you wanted me to paint. So I kind of like left that one alone, and then I finished the commission for him the way he wanted, but then took that other piece and like made another character. I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if he fought that duck guy I made like a year ago. And then like from there, this weird like fantasy world kind of sprung up out of it. I'm like, you know what? I should do like a comic book project because I've been wanting to have like some project where I can just kind of let loose and do whatever I want.
So you've been wanting to experiment more. It's pretty much like this started off as this like one time you got really high back in the day, and you've been experimenting with like a digital style that you don't normally do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because it's like, I've been like my mainstay for income has been like the NSFW stuff. And it's
Gotcha.
like, it's not like I'm even like this, I don't even classify myself as like a porn artist. Like, it's mostly
Yeah,
pinups.
you do
Like,
pinups. Yeah.
it's rarely like explicit, but like that's how I've been making like all of my income for the past like 4 or 5 years. And it's
Just
like I obviously I enjoy it, because like I think like I got into NSFW art to begin with because I found that that avenue is probably like the quickest way to get good at drawing anatomy.
100%. I agree with you. They're like for anybody that's struggling with anatomy, just draw like, nude figures.
Oh
Porn will help
yeah.
you the most
Mhm.
because like, when you think about how the body moves and you don't have clothes to,
Inhibit your movement or whatever. Yeah,
inhibit
and
your
it's like
movement. Also, clothes tend to, because people don't necessarily draw like the folds in clothes per se, they s- convert into shape language to
mhm,
make it more easier to process. And that's how
right.
people handle volume and form, not in a very realistic way, but in a way to uh, shortcut or like assume this is what a figure of like,
Oh
clothes
yeah,
look like.
there's so much like shorthand in it. Yeah.
Shorthand, that's the word, yeah.
Hmm.
But when you're just doing naked figures, there's very little shorthand you can get away with.
Right, right. But it's like, but that's also like the interesting like intersection between like most of my stuff is NSFW, but then I feel like because it's like I got this idea from there's this British video artist named Chris Cunningham.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know. Yeah, he did like he's done videos for like Apex Twin and stuff like that. Like he did like Window Licker, and then he did this short film called Rubber Johnny, which is amazing. But he used to work as a comic book artist, like at 2000 AD, who does like Judge Dredd and stuff.
Yep, yep, yep.
And like he in some interview was saying like the number one way to get to develop like quickness as an artist, like learning how to draw fast, is become a comic book artist.
I will attest to this. My speed in drawing has leveled up insanely purely because
Mm-hmm.
I draw comics. I've also like since I started drawing comics, I've skipped the whole sketch phase because I just go straight
Right.
into like my inks per se.
Mm-hmm. I still sketch a lot, but it's like even my sketches are kind of like I'm doing most of the work up in my head to begin with, and then like my sketches are very close to what my final ends up looking like. Yeah.
It's Judge Dredd is also like a phenomenal comic for anybody
Oh
that wants to
yeah.
like take a look
Phenomenal
into.
art, but then the Dread movie, the 2012 one, is incredible. Very slept on movie.
I have not seen the Judge Dredd movie from 2012.
Yeah, no, that one's amazing. Like, it's one of those like, it's definitely because it's like Judge Dredd and 2000 AD stuff is so like I mean it's British. It's like really quirky and goofy
It's
because it's like
very like not grim dark. I don't want to say grim dark, but it's that era of comics where it's just very over the top. Yeah, that's the word.
yeah over the top, but like intentionally edgy. Like they
Yeah,
know that edgy is funny rather than like edgy is cool.
yeah.
Kind of. And I know that like Judge Dredd was like pretty much like started as like a parody of like how violent American comics and American action movies were.
Yeah. It's that era of the 90s was just
I love it.
yeah.
It's perfect. Because it's like I like because going back to like my comic project is I think like the main thing that's been motivating me making this is it's like it takes so much like work and like mind power to kind of like revert back to like childhood tendencies.
Right.
And it's like it's like you pull out old drawings you did as a kid and it's like yeah you can like make fun of them or cringe at like oh how much I've improved as a drawer, but it's like you also look at it and you're like man I did not care if anyone liked this drawing was like just for me you know
I feel that.
and like oh sorry go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say the idea of just enjoying what you're working on, like making it self-indulgent for yourself, or
Hmm.
referencing things that made you happy when you were younger.
Right. Well, it's like, and that word, self-indulgent, is so like key to this project because it's like self-indulgent kind of has this like negative connotation to it, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
necessarily think that it's a negative thing.
oh yeah, no, me neither. I mean, like, obviously, it's like it depends on what you're talking about, but I think like as far as like art concerned, like artistic pursuits, like self-indulgence is perfectly fine. Like, in fact, I kind of prefer it because it's like you really see who the artist is through that.
Yeah, I
'Cause it's
mean,
like they're
you can go and think about Michelangelo, and like he was incredibly self-indulgent. You look at the Sistine Chapel, and like you stare up, and like the one thing where like the part of the Sistine. I need to show this for people that are going to be watching on YouTube. God flying in the Sistine Chapel,
hmm
where like it's kind of like a comic. It's like a sequitur piece. It's all one piece,
right.
but like the way how that one's supposed to portray God flying away is just like God's
hmm
pointing, and then like he like flies away on a cloud, and then he draws God with the most like cheeked up ass that I've seen ever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be
Oh,
pulling it
yeah.
up right now. Yeah, here it is. Okay, I found it. It's you won't be able to see this, but like just search God flying Sistine Chapel if anybody's listening right now, and it's literally the first thing that comes. Like the
Oh
first
yeah,
image.
yeah.
Like do you see how like God's ass is framed around like his like
Yeah, it's like it's just like
cloth?
an ass. It's like an ass window. Like it's,
Yeah,
but like
that is
that
purely
cloth is like
self-indulgent.
vacuum formed to his butt. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
great.
self-indulgent. My like no one commissioned him to do that.
Right, right.
Well, no, people commissioned him to do the Sistine Chapel. He was commissioned to do that, but like not rendering
They're
God's
not.
ass like that.
Yeah, like back then, I highly doubt that anyone was like really thought they even had like the authority to question his artistic decisions. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, just let him do it.
And but like artists have always been self-indulgent. It's throughout
Oh yeah.
all of time. And
Well,
now you're getting to the point where people like aren't allowed to be self-indulgent anymore. Like that's supposed to be frowned upon because like
mm-hmm,
everyone's very business oriented nowadays, and that's what I don't
yeah.
like.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's like, again, it's like the NSFW stuff I do is kind of like, again, not that I don't enjoy it, but there is like this sense of like, but it's also what I rely on for work. It's also like having to keep up that social media presence means like I have to, constantly be producing that kind of stuff. And it's like I just kind of get a bit sick of it at times. So it's like this comic project has been this kind of like really like much needed detour. Like,
Yeah,
it's just been like very refreshing to just work on these like bizarre creatures that like I was showing like some sneak peeks to one of my friends, and he goes like, these characters all look like 90s action figures, and I'm just like, yes, like exactly.
yeah,
Like,
that's very fun. It,
mm,
it's nice to be able to break the pace from whatever you're doing,
oh yeah.
because I need to do that myself too. Sometimes, as I'm drawing my comic, I'm working on nothing but comic work, or as I'm like
Mm,
drawing buildings because that's what I do professionally.
right.
Um, I need to break myself from that pace and do
Hmm.
something else just to, because I get very restless when I'm like working on things. I don't like working on the same thing for too long because
Oh yeah, same.
I feel like
Hmm.
I stagnate a little bit. And
Well, it's just like sometimes you just need that change of pace to like stop yourself from like going insane.
yeah, exactly.
Like, well, it's like because like one thing this project has also helped with is just like you start getting this like overwhelming sense of like being like depressed and feeling stuck in your art, even though it's like art's like probably one of the few things I've always been like very confident in, and now I'm like,
Hmm.
oh no, I'm not enjoying it right now. And then it's like, what? But it's like it's because I really haven't made art purely for myself in like such a long time because I've
Yeah.
been so work focused for like a decade.
Hmm. Hmm. I feel that's a rut that people get into. I feel that's what, when people deal with art block, I
Hmm.
feel that's a big part of it. Of just
Oh yeah, I
they're
agree.
not enjoying it anymore. And I've given this advice before, and other people on this show have given similar advice of just do something else. Don't do the thing that you've always been doing with art. Just learn how to like have fun or experiment or do something that's completely unrelated to what you normally do.
Right. And it's like, and it's kind of like, it's hard advice to give because it's like, it is great advice, but it's also like, how do you tell someone to experiment? Because it's like, experiment is so like, it's supposed to kind of come like naturally and like chaotically. So it's like, you can't really plan to
Well,
experiment.
the way
But
what
like,
I yeah,
oh,
continue.
no, no, just like, it's like, it's great advice, but it's like, kind of like, if people ask me, like, well, how do you experiment? I'm like, I don't know. Like,
So
you just
so
do.
so here's my thing is whenever I'm struggling with an art block, I don't draw for a little bit or I look at other things.
Oh,
And
same.
3 4 years ago I discovered Bob Peak as an artist.
Mhm.
Um
Love Bob Peak.
Bob Peak has been, I'm gonna be putting his work up on screen right now for people on YouTube. But for anybody listening, just search Bob Peak. He is one of the greatest illustrators of the last 60, 70 years.
Well, and I think the perfect way to describe him too is like you think of like modern movie poster like compositions. It's like that's him.
Him, yeah,
Like he came up with that.
he was the one that came up with that poster structure, specifically with Star Trek was
Hmm.
where like the modern poster comes from. But like some of his like best work, like I have a Bob Peak book. I saw this in
Hmm.
Burbank like 3 years ago when I was living in California in a comic book shop. It was in Japanese. It was a Art of Bob Peak book, but it was all in Japanese. And I
Oh,
saw it,
cool.
and I was just like, I need to own this thing. This thing is phenomenal. It was like hundreds of dollars, but I didn't carry it. I was like, I flipped through it. I was like, this is amazing. This is like exactly what I need because I was going through like my own little art block
Hmm.
at the time, and I was very inspired by 60s to 70s Bob Peak, where he had
Hmm.
those mono palettes. or like
Yeah, and that
singular
like
color palette.
washed out oil technique or
Yeah,
whatever, where he's like rubbing stuff out of it. And it's just like, God, that looks so cool. I know.
and I wanted to like incorporate some of that because it looks very poppy, like pop art.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Because it's like when you have those like really limited palettes, it's like you can kind of get away with these like very acidic colors, which
Yeah,
is so cool to see.
and very bold forms and a lot of high contrast color work. And I've been doing a lot more of that because of Bob Peak, because I needed to
Mhm.
like explore and experiment with that, and now it's become like a part of like what I do with my own stuff regularly.
Well, and it's cool too that it's like you have all these like aspects that are so like interwoven in people's styles, but it's like I think a lot of those aspects kind of like evolved out of those kind of shorthand techniques we were talking about. Like Bob Peak to me is like probably one of those like progenitors of like what we now know as like shape design.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
like but like he was probably clear like I mean he was using it for a stylistic purpose obviously, but also it's like but it's also quicker. Like instead of rendering the whole figure, I'll turn this into like a flat
yeah. It's flat like pop art.
then
Definitely.
had to like
I think you're breaking up just a little bit right now.
so it's like they had to come up with these techniques, but well the technique would also be stylish and cool looking.
Yeah. It's he's been one of my favorites, and I do lean more towards his more early work, personally.
Hmm.
But he's still done like phenomenal stuff after the fact. His Sports Illustrated covers that he's done. Let me see if I can find them in particular. Bob Peak Sports Illustrated.
But yeah, I think like on this topic though of like art block, I think like one thing that like I've tried to hammer into anybody who like asks me advice on that is like how important it is to kind of develop that like dictionary in your head of artists to like look at and reference and get inspiration from. Like I like probably subconsciously like reference like hundreds of artists every time I draw anything. Like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
I like the way that this guy draws knees. I like the way that this guy draws elbows, or the way that this person does this, and like having that giant like bank of reference to always fall back on is so much like it helps so much because it's like I remember when I went to art school and you know it's like most of my professors it's like they know who all these old illustrators are but like most of my classmates didn't you know they
he,
just
he,
kind of came into art school just with that like basic high school art education.
I got a funny story actually. If I can just detract just
Oh
very
yeah,
quickly.
please do.
Um, when I was studying animation, because after I left architecture, I immediately went to animation at the School of Visual Arts, and I came in late because I applied very late, but I still got in. But like the classes
Mhm.
that I had to pick from were like blocks of classes, and one of the blocks for storyboarding, like for freshmen, this is for people just entering the school. Uh,
Mhm.
one of the like three of the blocks were already filled out completely. One of them had Bob Camp as a storyboard professor. The guy
Wow.
that's, legendary for Ren and Stimpy. He's done a lot of SpongeBob work
Right.
lately. Not My Life as a Teenage Robot. He's done some Hey Arnold stuff. He's done some what's that Robot Boy? I think the name of that show was
Oh,
the one with the square-headed kid. But essentially, he is like a master of
oh yeah.
American storyboarding and like one of the best people you could possibly learn from. And his class, like, I was surprised that nobody clamored to like pick his class or like pick that
That's
block that had
insane.
him in it. And like the first day I came in, I was just like, "Yo, it's Bob Camp," and we were singing "Happy, Happy, Joy, Joy," and he was trying to get the whole class to sing along, but like nobody else knew the lyrics but me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, "Ah, damn, man! Everyone's here for like because this is the school that Rebecca Sugar went to," and I'm like, "Yo, Bob Camp though."
I feel like at like the school I went to, like there was a few professors who are like currently working or had like impressive resumes, but a lot of them were kind of just like they were just mostly professors, and it's like when you did get that rare teacher who was like, "Oh my god, I've seen your work before and it's amazing. Like I want to go out of my way to take you." It's always so cool when you got a teacher like that.
But yeah, no,
But
but you were
no,
you were
but
talking about your experiences in
yeah,
college and how people did not know certain
yeah,
illustrators.
yeah. So it's like my first live figure drawing class I had. The teacher, the professor, he was the coolest guy ever. But I think like I had a in like because one of the assignments we had for this figure drawing class was he made all of us buy like an 100-page sketchbook, and he said like by the end of the semester that thing has to be filled out back and front with like anatomy drawings, and it's like several pages. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do like studies of like Frank Frazetta. And for those who don't know, Frank Frazetta is like the quintessential like fantasy painter
Yeah,
ever, probably. um, but I remember the professor is like, oh, that's like such a great idea doing studies of Frazetta. And so then he kind of like interrupted the class and he kind of like put me on the spot for a second. And he goes like, does anyone else in this class know who Frank Frazetta is? And like maybe the model raised her hand, and then like my brother raised his hand. But
that is
other than that, none of the kids knew who Frazetta was. And the professor was just like, "Are you fucking kidding me?
that is
How do you guys not know?"
I feel like no one knows Conan the Barbarian stuff because he's done some Conan stuff.
Oh, like I mean, his compositions are just incredible.
Oh yeah.
Like, well, it's like I think the funniest thing about Frazetta is like it's easy to kind of dismiss him in like serious art circles just because it's like subject matter. It's like it's naked barbarians, like,
But
but
look at the
it's
mastery that he has of like the
oh, I
form.
know. Well, it's like his mastery of form is like impeccable, but then like I was watching a video of his like a few months back, and it kind of like I saw a side of him that I didn't really expect. Is he goes like whenever he's like making a composition, he always like flips the composition up down, not in that way of like flip it horizontal to see if the eyes look all wonky or anything, but like he'll flip his entire composition upside down and determine like does this look interesting as like an abstract image. And he said if it looks interesting as an abstract, then that's all he cares about.
Interesting. I can definitely see that. And now I haven't thought about Frank Frazetta like that. In terms of like he uses a lot of negative space. That's what I know Frank Frazetta for.
Mm-hmm.
And the way how
Mm-hmm.
he specifically I'm thinking about his pieces like again the Conan Barbarian piece where like he has this like one where like this monkey is attacking him on like these tree
Oh.
vines,
Mm-hmm.
and there it's just the framing of that piece is just phenomenal. Like his sense of frame is just very good.
Oh yeah, no, he knows how to like keep your eye like swirling around the image without it ever like exiting the page. Like you're just gonna be trapped. Like your eye just finding all these new paths of like interest and detail, and it's like his paintings are almost like well, it's like probably better than any other artist I've ever seen. It's like capturing like a moment in time.
Yeah.
Like you just
M-
paused
like yeah,
real
mid
life. Like
action. Yeah.
nothing looks yeah, nothing looks posed. Nothing looks like staged. It's just like you caught a raw moment in time.
No, Frank's always been like it's very funny because like that's the point of art school, right? You go to art school to learn, and like
Hmm.
maybe you won't know all these like different artists or anything like that, like Rembrandt, for example, is like one of like the masters like from back in the
Oh
day.
yeah, of course.
But
Hmm.
like I granted I went to school for animation, but when I was doing figure drawings, like I have a cursory knowledge of painters and like figure artists, because like when I made the decision to start learning how to draw, that's pretty much when I was 20, and I,
Hmm.
I did a lot of research into a bunch of different like artists. I was going to museums a lot at that time because I was very serious about learning how to draw
Hmm.
and studying from like different figure like painters, figure artists, figure drawings in particular was something that I was looking into because animation is predominantly figure and gesture.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
Well, and it's like, and that was kind of like the, like, I think that was like probably the most frustrating thing about the art school I went to is like, and it's like, I don't want to sound like I'm this, like super, like superior artist or anything, but like, there's like a lot of people like in like our animation program where like they simply didn't seem like interested in learning how to draw the figure. And it's like, you're in animation, you have to.
yeah, yeah.
Like the amount of people who didn't know how to draw that well was kind of shocking. And it's like, and I'm saying that like trying to not sound insulting. It's just like,
Yeah, I feel you.
oh my god.
It's
Because it's
I
like,
feel like that experience is the same everywhere though, because whenever you go to any type of schooling, there are going to be the students that are very serious about the subject,
mm-hmm,
and then there are going to be other people that are just trying to graduate and get that grade.
right, right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, it's disappointing, but I mean that's the nature of us
Oh, absolutely.
going to school for a degree. But like the more you go into it, especially nowadays, just like is a degree even really worth it? I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you feel?
yeah. Um, I would like. I'd say it's like the biggest thing with going to art school that like where you benefit from it is like you do have to be a very like self-motivated kind of artist.
Repeat
Like if
yourself
you're
again.
expecting, you have to be like a very self-motivated artist. Like
Right.
because like if you're kind of expecting your hand to be held, it's like you're not gonna go far. You're not gonna really get anything done. You're not gonna really learn a whole lot.
Yeah, it's
Because it's like I certainly like I have my problems with the school I went to, but I did like learn plenty. But I feel like most of my learning was just done through like being able to talk to professors about like art, like being able to talk like who are their favorite artists,
yeah,
and you're like, oh
yeah,
my god, like this guy's amazing or whatever. And it's like then you'd have those other like high level students who cared like you did or whatever, and it's like they would introduce you to their favorite artists or they would like make some amazing painting and you're like, god, I wish I could paint like that. So it's like that's the most valuable thing, whereas like the diploma itself, haven't needed it a single time.
yep.
And
I
like I graduated, oh god, 8 years ago. Where's the time go? But yeah. And it's
for
like, especially now with just like like the internet, it's like you can find so much stuff, and it's like not just necessarily like, oh, just go to YouTube, like, but it's like you can interact with artists firsthand. You can join Discord servers and watch people draw and stream and everything. So I don't know how much that like. I don't want to say like getting an art degree is worthless at this point, but it's still like you might be better off just on your own at this point. I don't know.
I have a mixed feeling about it because art school definitely helped me out a lot personally.
Hmm.
Because again, I'm going at it as someone who had zero art knowledge going into art school. I just have like I took a year to just practice and like building up my portfolio. I got rejected from art school my first time applying, and
Okay.
and then I got in my second time applying because I was just continuously pushing my own work and trying to develop. And even then it was not that good. But art school helped me out because I feel like the type of person that art school helps out is the type of person that tries to take as much out of it as possible.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. Because it's like I do think that ultimately yeah, I also did get a lot out of it. But as general advice for everybody, I don't know if I can recommend it.
Yeah, no,
Because it's yeah, attitudes are gonna vary so much.
I recommend it if you care about developing social skills, working with a lot of, because the benefit of being in art school is having a bunch of different artists around you at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially making friends with people around you. And I feel like it's nice to make friends with people that are in they share the same physical space as you do, because you can
Right.
have
Mm-hmm.
more I wouldn't say more meaningful conversations, but more practical conversations, because again, you're not worried about time of day or what's the word, uh time zones, trying to deal with
Mm-hmm.
people from different parts of the world, or different schedules. If you have people with similar schedules to you, you can get
Well, and
along.
it's or you can talk to people online for months and still not really know who they are. You
Yeah.
know, yeah. So
or
yeah, no, I get you completely.
and having people around you, it makes it feel like a rivalry almost, where you're trying to
Yeah.
it's not necessarily competitive, but you're trying to boost each other up. You're trying to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh hey, here's what you did on that thing. And when you're working on similar projects and different interpretations, because that's what art is, it's just a bunch of massive different interpretations of the same prompt. And
Mm-hmm.
then you
Right.
learn more about yourself via what you learn about others, and everyone's kind of helping each other out in that
Oh
sense.
yeah, for sure.
That's
Mm-hmm.
the ideal way how you should go about art school. There were definitely people that did not do that the time that I went through.
Right. Right. Yeah, because it's that's where I got frustrated. Is I wish there were just more people who cared more.
Yeah.
That's ultimately my big complaint.
I
It's
also
I
had
felt like I didn't
phenomenal
have a
professors,
whole. Mm-hmm. Oh, that obviously helps. Yeah.
because if I did not have good professors, I don't know, but I had really good professors that taught me a lot of different things and got me onto a bunch of different artists, filmmakers, and
Oh yeah.
discussions too. Just talking about art and learning how to use programs, for me in particular, because I was working in Flash a lot in college, and I
Okay.
had a professor that was
Hmm.
just a Flash whiz, and
Oh, that's great. Hmm.
I learned a lot of techniques and everything from him that I use to this day.
Yeah, the on the program side of things, I got most of my knowledge of that way before art school because my parents were also freelancers
Oh,
my
nice.
entire life. Um, yeah, my dad was an illustrator and my mom was a graphic designer. So my dad was always working in Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. Meanwhile, my mom was always working in InDesign and Illustrator.
That's really cool.
So it's yeah, it's they also taught me the ins and outs of freelance. Not that freelancing is this super complicated field. It's just kind of it's just how to take measures where you don't get screwed over. Is basically what they instilled in me. That's the most basic stuff they taught me about freelancing. But yeah, it's having that kind of household to grow up in was very beneficial. Because it's my dad was also into Frank Frazetta, and even though he didn't paint that kind of stuff for a living, he mostly did because it's being in the Detroit area, always automobile stuff.
Right,
Because it's
right, right.
that's the whole city's economy is centered around auto, and
Oh yeah,
so it's
freelance
my
back in
dad
the day.
did.
Yeah.
And it's and that's the interesting thing too, is because it's I can take a lot of their advice over the years, because it's some of the freelance stuff is never outdated. Certain things will always be the same for freelancers. but at the same time, it's like they never used like social media, you know, like they had to always like send out mailers and like postcards and business cards and get most of their clients through word of mouth.
That's yeah, because like things aren't the same way nowadays, especially like being a freelancer. You can work for a company all the way in like China or like Thailand, like from home, essentially.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wonder how do they feel about like current like trajectory of freelance, because I'm very curious about that, since they grew up in a different
Well,
period of developing art.
yeah. Well, like my dad passed away like 10 years ago, but
Oh.
like my mom is kind of transferred into like she works corporate now,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it's like she definitely is like obviously it's like the freedom of freelance of like being able to determine your own schedule, being your own boss and stuff is like obviously a very like nice aspect of freelance, but also it's just like, but man, like having a steady paycheck after all these years is so nice.
I
like like and having benefits,
Oh,
and
that's the one.
having
That's the big one. Yeah.
oh, then also just like as a freelancer having to like do all of your taxes, like it's not taken out like in a
Mm-hmm.
paycheck. It's like no, you had to figure out all that stuff, and it's awful. It's terrible.
There's there's a lot of nice things about freelance. Again, specifically what you described, being your own boss, setting your own hours. But there's very little. I mean, a good reputation is what your job security is going to be, essentially.
Oh yeah. Well, because it's like even though we're gonna ask like or answer viewer questions at the end, like one of the questions I noticed was like just about like freelance advice,
Okay,
and it's like
we'll get
and
into
I
that
will,
later. Yeah.
but it's like while talking about it now though, it's like I will parrot that like your reputation's everything. Like my parents always told me that it's like it's there'll always be someone more talented than you, always.
Mm-hmm.
uh, there'll always be someone who's more in demand, more trendy, whatever. But it's like, but if you're not reliable, you're not going to get work. So it's
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
they banked on being like, yeah, we might not be the most flashy illustrators out there, or the most like exciting graphic designers out there, but we have a reputation for getting our work done ahead of time and doing it well. And that's how they were able to survive doing that for so long. So
Consistency is key,
mhm.
is what I tell anybody. Because I have friends that are in freelance hell right now, where they're just working on multiple different projects at once,
Oh, yeah.
and
Hmm.
sometimes that's what you got to do. But if you're on top of yourself and you can deliver, people will love you for it, and they'll keep asking you for more work later on in the future.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because it's like because like one thing I've always tried to do, like whenever I take on commissions, is like I've developed like especially from doing comics for so long, because like some first freelance work ever was comic books. Like, gosh, I probably did like at least like 500 pages of comic book commission stuff like right out of college.
Oh, that's
And
really cool. That's fun.
it was like yeah for like Kickstarter campaigns and stuff like that, or like I I've dealt with some weird people like trying to like use comics as this like springboard for making some big multimedia project, and it just never pans out or whatever. But um that quickness that you develop from working on comics has probably been like my biggest asset, because like whenever I open up commissions, I usually take on like 40 at a time.
Oh
And
wow.
it's like I can usually get them done within like the span of like a month and a half. Granted, like after that month and a half, I'm like wiped out. Like I can't draw for a while. But it's like I can take on a large volume because I know that like I have the speed to do it. And it's not like my speed sacrifices like quality. It's not like I draw really sloppy or bad or anything. But
You've just developed the skill set to do that. Yeah.
and again, it's from the comic book stuff. Like it's just studying all these different artists. Where it's just like, oh, how do you draw this but draw it quickly, or how do you indicate this without having to put too much work into it? The work smarter, not harder thing.
Speaking of Corto Maltese, that's the guy that I need to like. The
Hugo Pratt.
Pratt. Yeah. I
Mm-hmm,
need to I
mm-hmm.
need to study Hugo Pratt in particular.
Oh, me too.
His comic work is phenomenal for anybody listening right now. Corto Maltese is an Italian adventure comic, like fantasy adventure. I don't know how you would specifically define it.
Yeah, like not fantasy as in like sword and sorcery, kind of like adventure fantasy, like
Yeah, adventure
Indiana Jones.
fantasy. Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
Johnny Quest, that type of era of just wonder, travel, adventure. But Hugo Pratt is a phenomenal like draftsman in terms of comics and the way how he handles his. I need to. I'm putting it up on screen right now. But like for anybody, again, if you're listening in, search Corto Maltese comic on Google. CORTO space MALTESE, and you can
Yeah.
find a lot of his single page stuff, and the way he puts ink on paper and like the very few lines to suggest facial expression.
Oh yeah, no, it's so efficient and economical, but also it's like in that kind of abstract sense, like every single one of his marks just like looks cool.
Yeah,
Like
it's
artists who can pull that off are just like you're on another level, man.
it's deceptively simple, is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fundamental like anatomy understanding, and the way how his fundamental skills in drawing are just so good that he can just simplify things and cut them down to like extreme bare minimums. And his framing is phenomenal. I love all of his frames. Every single panel is just structured properly. Even like the way, because he writes a lot of dialogue in the comics, like for Corto Maltese. But despite that, everything reads clearly.
Oh yeah, no, he's a master of like space and design. Like there's like nothing about it looks like haphazard the way that a lot of comics tend to look.
Yeah,
Like a lot of comics look like so cluttered. But
I have been trying to like simplify the frame in my comic lately, but I feel like I can go more minimal the way how he does it for his stuff, like his very early stuff.
Right.
But Hugo Pratt, he's also just genuinely a phenomenal artist.
Well, and it's like those European comic artists in particular are just like insane. Like I don't know, like it's probably large part to do with the fact that like comic books over here, I feel like it's like you kind of have like a semblance of like it being respected as like an art form with legendary comic books like Watchmen or whatever. But it's like you have to understand that like over in Europe, like comics are treated as like a serious art form.
Yeah.
Like especially in France, like they revere them a lot. And it's like, and that clearly shows with like the amount of like really talented but like super distinct artists they have.
It's a lot of the art within Europe at the time, like comic art, is helmed by one person, usually in particular.
Oh yeah, they do the inking, penciling, coloring, bubbling, everything.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And in American comics, what I like to do, like how I like to treat it, is European comics are more of an art form, and American comics, and when I'm talking about American, I'm talking about specifically like right now I'm not indie stuff, but like cape comics. in
Yeah,
particular,
yeah.
which is when people think American comics, they think Cape Comics, like Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse. And the American model for comics is very business oriented. They're thinking about how do we
Mhm.
sell comic books. They're not thinking about the artist behind the work or the identity of this comic as
Yeah,
art, but they're
right. And
thinking
it's like
about it.
to different degrees. Like obviously, it's like Marvel and DC are kind of like they just do not uphold that at all. Whereas like Dark Horse, I feel like has some like European tendencies. Like they do have Dark Horse generally has like more artist centric projects, which
Yeah,
I've always appreciated.
but even then, they're still thinking about it like a publisher.
Oh,
With an
absolutely.
editor in mind and with an audience.
Well,
What
or and this character belongs to a popular IP.
exactly? They're
Like
trying.
even if something as phenomenal as like Hellboy is still like he's still like a multimedia character. He's still like a property. You know.
Yeah, where Europe had Asterix, that Viking comic
Mm-hmm.
by, I forgot the name of the guy that made it.
Uh, Uderzo or something. I
Asterix and
don't remember.
Obelix
Yeah, I don't remember
by
his last name. But
Rene. Okay, Albert Uderzo and Rene Goscinny, and
okay.
it's such a phenomenal, like, fun series. I remember growing up with this stuff because, like, I'm a little European boy at heart, so I
Hmm.
grew up with a lot of this stuff. Tintin was also a classic.
Yeah, it's like my exposure to all this stuff, like all the European stuff, was like probably just stumbling across like I know my dad had like a couple issues of like heavy metal, and it's like I know
Oh
that
yeah,
heavy metal is how a lot of these European artists found their way over here, and like man, that magazine, definitely did not uphold a certain level of quality over the years.
oh, I'm
It's like
when you're talking about heavy metal, I was originally thinking about the movie from way back in the day.
mm, but yeah, no, the magazine, which like the movie's based off the
Yeah,
magazine,
yeah, yeah.
basically. But no, it's like it's hard to overstate the impact that those artists have had on like our pop culture as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they're kind of these like unsung heroes that like nobody knows who they are, but you've seen their work. Like it's everywhere. like I'm sure you're familiar with like Mobius.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mobius
John
is phenomenal.
Giraud. I don't know how to pronounce French last names, but no, like I feel like the entire cyberpunk aesthetic is his. Like he came up with that first, which is insane. Like it's this like such an ubiquitous thing now, but it's like no, that's Mobius who came up
Yeah,
with that.
and it's kind of a shame because Mobius had phenomenal color work that you don't see that much in that, like, current genre of cyberpunk or
Yeah.
like dystopian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, like, I
Because like
wish people still, like, looked at that stuff and took inspiration from it.
oh yeah, absolutely. Is like his mark on it's like even if like properties like this have also gone down that very like cynical hole of like being just massively just turned into like a product, soulless product, like Star Wars for example. It's like Star Wars still like owes a ton to Mobius.
Oh,
Blade
100%.
Blade Runner owes a ton to Mobius. Like every single like quintessential sci-fi movie you can think of can be traced back to him, which is like insane.
Mobius is just the background work in every single one of those pages is I don't know how he had the time.
Oh, I know. Well, it's like you were talking about how it's like, these European artists, it's like they had like American comics are usually divvied up into like, oh, you have a penciler, and then you have someone who inks them, and then you have someone who colors them, and then you have another person who does the word bubbling. But like Europe, like they all do it themselves, but then on top of that, their panels are so excessively detailed.
Yeah.
like like there'll be like 16 panels on a page, and each one of those panels has like 500 characters in it. You're like,
It,
how do you keep this up, man?
it's very particular, and well, the infamy with European comic artists is like they take a while to get things finished,
Oh yeah, sure.
and it's
Absolutely.
not like their body of work is massive. Is the thing. It's mostly they have.
Mobius is pretty damn big, but
Oh
yeah.
no, Mobius is that's a different like comparison point. The
Oh, for
dude
sure.
still he still went on like he's crazy. He's just been drawing nonstop. He never retiring.
Well, and like another great story about Mobius that I think is like a great thing to tell like artists struggling, because it's like artists are always comparing themselves to other artists. Like, oh, I'll never be as good as this person. I should just stop, or I'll never be that good. Is like, it's that realization that like your favorite artist also thought that way.
Yeah.
Like, I heard this one, like, and it's like Mobius to me is like one of those like few artists that's like that I can call like he's a god. He's a god of art. Like
Yeah.
he's just like immaculate. But one time when he came to the US, he was walking around, I think, like the DC Comics offices just because he was visiting. And there was this page on the table by this artist named Jose Garcia Luis Lopez. And he mostly did like Wonder Woman and like Teen Titans stuff. But Mobius looks at this page and he goes like, who did this? And this guy goes like, oh, that's Jose's work or whatever. And Mobius is just like, son of a bitch. Fucking good. Or like, I know that when Mobius first saw like Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira manga,
Oh.
he was just like, he took one look at it and he goes, this makes me want to quit. And you're like, you made
That's
Mobius
insane. That's crazy.
Even though it's like Otomo is like inspired by Mobius. So it's just, but it's like you made your hero want to quit. That's bragging rights right there.
Well, it goes to show the level of. I mean, Akira has phenomenal background work too.
Akira is just jaw dropping.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm sure Mobius also really liked Hugo Pratt and the like too.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of cross pollination with influences there, and like Otomo, like Katsuhiro Otomo of Akira fame, when he drew Akira, it's just like he looked at like Mobius for inspiration, especially for the cityscapes. And the attention to detail. I mean, he also had a bunch of assistants too because of the way how the manga industry worked.
Oh god, yeah.
But even then, even with a bunch of assistants, there's still like an immaculate level of just work and detail.
Oh
and
well,
scale.
they're still going off of like his layouts and
Exactly.
like ideas. So it's yeah.
That's where I'm like with my own comic, because like right now for Boxcar City, I haven't updated it in 2 weeks because I'm working on this like insanely intricate background. My Patreons know because I've been showing them the progress of the page, but it's just
it requires an astounding amount of patience.
Yeah, patience, work, especially when you want to like get it to look right. Because I could do it quickly, but I want to do it right is the thing, especially for the scene that I'm trying to convey.
Well, because especially like architecture and stuff, like with figures and like especially like figures that are like heavily stylized, you can really fudge the perspective. Whereas it's like buildings, no. Like if something looks perspectively off, it's gonna look like it topples over.
Especially for this page right now, like just for like a little like preview for people listening, is essentially an interior shot of a movie theater that I'm drawing right now. But I couldn't find a single reference to make it look exactly how I wanted it to. So I essentially just invented an entire, like, I put a bunch of, like, different perspective grids. I'm making the perspective work properly. This is, like, a movie theater that I'm inventing off the top of my head. just to get the shot looking in a very particular way, and the way how the chairs curve into each other into the distance to like
Right.
get that idea. And it just takes work. That's something I told people, like, if you really want to sell a world or an environment, you need to draw the backgrounds. You need to
Oh, yeah.
put some time and
Well,
energy into it.
yeah, and like going back to like art school mode, because like for those who don't know, like I taught a semester of drawing at the art school where I graduated from, and like I think like the number one shortcut I see artists trying to take is not learning perspective, and how it's like how important that is to like everything you draw. And it's like it's not like you need to learn how to like draw perfectly in perspective, but you should at least know how basic shapes and forms turn in space and how they are
Exactly.
changed by like the angle you're looking at them and vantage point and everything. Because it's like I do think that's where because it's like most people learning how to draw and who are struggling, they kind of want to skip right to the fun stuff. And it's like you like I know you want to, but you can't. Like it's going to be way harder for you if you try like delving into something as complicated as a human figure without knowing how to like draw a box.
Exactly. It's and it's not that I don't enjoy doing backgrounds. I love background work. I have a lot of fun actually, inventing spaces and layouts, how characters interact with the space. I love doing that. The thing is, it takes a while. It's very
yeah.
it's very tough to do shortcuts for something like that. You gotta really, really, really sit down and just start considering how space works and where you put your vantage points and how your vantage points works. And there are ways you can bend perspective rules, but you need to really know perspective in order to do that. And I know I really know perspective, and there are times where I'm just like, okay, but for this I cannot be bending it like that. I need to like give the scene
Right.
the dedication it deserves.
Right. Well, and it's like even one of my professors, my perspective professor who like taught perspective for like 40 years, he still had to contend that like if it looks right, it's right.
Yeah.
Like even if it's wrong, if it looks right, it's right. But it's like there are those times where it's like no, this will not look right unless it's actually right.
Yeah. Unless you're very particular with the form and I'm doing this like crazy 3-point perspective bend with the chairs too, and it's just, and they're not square chairs, they're like movie chairs where they have that like indent and curve to them,
Right.
and it takes a minute, is the thing.
Right.
Even as I'm trying to stylize it to fit within the world of my comic, I still need to make it behave properly in perspective.
Right. Well, because it's like I think most people think of like perspective as like because it's like everyone had to do those drawings like in elementary school, middle school, where it's like draw a city in like 1-point perspective.
Yeah.
Like very basic art exercise, but like when you're dealing with like the stuff you're dealing with, like this 3-point perspective, a lot of people, since they don't know how to like set up like those perspective grids, they don't know what like the cone of vision is. And for those who don't know, like your cone of vision is like, what is it, like 180 degrees or something, or like 90 degree, like you have a 90-degree cone of vision if you're looking at anything, and anything that like falls outside of that cone of vision is like warping.
Yeah.
So like that's where a lot of people kind of like they start making perspective drawings that look really weird, is like, well, because that's at an angle a human just cannot see.
Yeah. And they're like, the urge to correct it a little bit is always there, and to me sometimes like, learn to draw bigger than what your frame actually is. So learn to draw outside your frame, and then like you crop it to like, be proper. That's something I learned in animation school. Just always draw outside the frame. don't just like stop drawing just because it's out of frame. Just finish the rest of that thing.
Right. Well, it also kind of reminds me too, just as a funny little anecdote, is like this happened a lot when I was a student and also happened a lot when I was a teacher. But like students tend to draw really small, and I don't quite know why. I think like it might have to deal with like when you're drawing really small, it's kind of like you have a lot of control and tightness over what you're drawing. Like, you're really zoomed in kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Whereas like to me, it's like a big key to learning how to draw is like step back.
Oh.
Take a step back, look at the composition as a whole, and realize like you're drawing really tiny, and also like when you're really tiny, like drawing really tiny, you also have like I don't know, like you don't have actually as much control to like play with things. So
I try and zoom out as much as possible. I like to be able to see my entire frame as I'm drawing something.
mm-hmm.
And I'll only go. I mean, I also work very simple in terms of my art. I try and simplify form as much as possible, which makes it a bit easier to like work farther back. But whenever there's like intricate detail that I need to put focus on, I will take that time to zoom in just for that detail. But that's after the fact. That's like towards the end of the process.
Right, yeah. Well, it's like when you're first like devising the drawing to begin with, it's like, no, you have to draw zoomed out. Like you gotta visualize the whole. And it's like then if you want to go in and add more detail, like, yeah, that's when you can zoom in. But like you start out zoomed out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was like probably that was like the number one bad habit I had to like knock out of all of my students is like zoom out and take a step back.
That's very interesting.
Because it's like one thing too that was like really helpful when I was doing figure drawing. The professor who was getting on everyone's case for not knowing who Frazetta was. Like one of the other big tips he gave me was like, because we were drawing at these easels, standing up, and these big like 18 by 24 sketchbook pads.
Right.
And he told people to like draw with your arm instead of drawing with your wrist. Like put your whole arm into the motion of your pencil rather than just your wrist.
That makes sense for traditional media, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like, again, it's like your wrist is this kind of like very like the like your range of motion in your wrist is very like controlled and tight. And it's good for like detail or whatever, but it's like when you're trying to get like say like the gesture of a figure, you should put like almost your whole body into it. Because it's like even my professor would kind of is almost like when he would draw, it almost looks like he was like fencing.
Like the way I can picture it in my head. Yeah,
dance back and forth a little bit.
Because he's like my figure drawing professor, because he also is very similar. He's not necessarily fencing like where like the pencil is pointed like completely.
Oh yeah, no, not quite like that, but yeah, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, but like full arm extended and then just like doing wide sweeping gestures.
Well, it's like even my perspective professor, where it's like, this isn't the human form. These are like very tight 3D objects they had to draw precisely. It's like he could draw a perfect circle with his arm, like outstretched. Because it's like if you're trying to do it with your wrist, you're gonna do it in all these little like segments or whatever. Whereas like if your arm, you can kind of just make one big sweeping motion.
I think for me personally, the benefit of like me starting off studying architecture and then moving on to like art proper. In architecture, it gave me control, specifically with how I draw, but also in like what you were describing, architecture needs to step back. You cannot be just drawing like starting with the windows or like thinking about the windows in particular. You need to be working with the general form of like the building or the structure or the space that you're in.
Right.
And you need to consider things like that as a whole, not as particular elements within it.
Right. Well, and it's like that's why I kind of always liken drawing, pretty much like drawing of any kind, to like think like a sculptor. Because it's like sculptors, it's like you're given just this giant block, and you have to like first make these kind of more primitive forms and then chisel away at it until it's more specific. It's like that's the way you should approach like any kind of art. Like obviously it's like once you gotten to the point where you like really know what you're doing, you can break free from that like method, but I do think generally that's how all art should be made.
Fundamentals are important. I mean, I do think about things. You wouldn't look at it looking at my art in like from a first glance, but I think a lot about form and the way how form goes into, like how one arm goes into the shoulder, goes into the body, goes into the neck.
Right.
I do think about that like structure a lot, and I pace my drawings in that way.
Well, I can tell, yeah.
Because I'm not again, since I don't sketch, I pretty much treat every drawing as like, you know, a figure drawing in a way, where I'm looking at like the way how when you're figure drawing, in particular when you're doing life studies, or like looking at models, you're looking at how the line can imply form and volume and move from one line into the other, and that's what I do with my own art in that way. Like I'm like seeing how the form evolves or like, you know, becomes real within the art. But yeah,
because it's like every line should like indicate some kind of form. Like that's why I've never been a fan of like extraneous line work. Like don't put lines where there doesn't need to be them. You know?
That's how
Granted,
some people
I know
make
there's
like
certain artists that are like excessively detailed, and that's their style. That's fine, but
no, I mean people can make it work, but they're like some people get over reliant on it, and the most like apt example of this when you see a young or like a new artist who's just trying to, you know, really practice line work, and you tell them to draw a young person, they make them look weirdly old. Usually.
Well, it's like that's even a problem that like a lot of professional artists have. It's like you look at the like you want to test someone's real ability, see how you draw a child.
Yeah.
Like I remember going to this one like art exhibit once, and it was like an art exhibit I think for like architecture, and I know that like most architecture people aren't going to be like super, you know, like experienced at drawing the figure because that's not what they studied or whatever.
But
Like
I feel like there's overlap. I feel like there's overlap. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I know there's like this drawing of like a projection of like a living room or something in the architecture. Like the architect drew a few figures in it.
Oh
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
all my friends were like really squinting, looking at like the child, and you're like, this is like the ugliest kid I've ever seen in my life. Like it looks like this gremlin old man. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's
Well, it's like it's even a problem too. You see with like people who shouldn't like know the figure like back and forth. Like there's that Marvel artist from like the 70s and 80s, John Byrne. He's like mostly
Byrne,
famous. Like mostly did like Wolverine. Like Wolverine was like his baby pretty much. But there's this one infamous page he did where he drew like, you know, a mom like helping with her two kids like in the bathtub or something. And these two babies in the bathtub have like the face of the way he draws adult men.
Wait, I need to find this
with like
yes,
baby bodies.
yes, I see
It was
this. Yeah,
horrible.
I'm putting it up on screen with I think it's Scarlet
Like, isn't
Witch.
that amazing?
That is very funny.
And it's like, you know, I don't want to throw shade at the guy, but you're just like, how did this happen?
See, this is where we can learn from Hugo Pratt.
Exactly. Yep.
And learn to do a lot with a little.
Yeah, obviously it's like in that European realm you do have like a lot of artists like Mobius to me is like one of the few where it's like he's able to balance that like insane level of detail while still making everything look
readable,
like, light and elegant.
He has a very good in architecture there's this fundamental principle of thick to thin, where
Mm-hmm.
things that are closer to you are thicker in line weight, and once you go deeper, like farther back, you lower the detail and you lower the line weight to,
Mm-hmm.
show the depth. And that's something I picked up, and that's what I use consistently to this day and age for everything forever. It's just universal. That's what I feel.
Right. Well, that's how I was also taught, and that's how I was told to teach too. It's like, yeah. But yeah, it's like, but meanwhile, there's like other artists in that realm. Like, do you know Jeff Darrow?
No, I don't know. How do you spell his last
Uh,
name?
it's just Darrow with a D in front. But
Darrow. Okay.
he uh he first gained prominence like doing mini series with like Frank Miller. He did this mini series called Hard Boiled, which
Oh, okay, 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 okay. I'm looking
he
at his
like
stuff right now. Yeah.
he is like the most excessively detailed comic book artist to like ever live. And like that's his whole shtick. And but like he is damn good at it though.
Yeah, no, these are phenomenal. It kind of, I feel like Tradmore. If you know Tradmore, he's like, I feel like he's taken some inspiration from
Oh, I've heard the name. Let me look him up really quick.
Tradmore. He's most known for his series The Legend of Luther Strode for Image Comics, but he's also done stuff for Ghost Rider.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Weirdly.
yeah.
And
Kind
the
of
way how he
psychedelic looking stuff.
and the way how he handles line work in particular is very involved but extremely clear.
Mm-hmm.
Tradmore Luther Strode is what I would recommend to look at.
Jeff Darrow though is also one of the probably like the coolest stories as far as like never let anyone tell you that like artists don't play like an important like place in society or whatever, because like um probably the other thing that Jeff Darrow's most known for is he was like the main concept art for the Matrix,
Oh,
or the main concept artist for the Matrix.
let me
But
check this. Whoa, okay.
so the cool story about that was like he had done this hard boiled miniseries with Frank Miller for Dark Horse in like the early 90s, and the Wachowskis were trying to find him. They're like, we want this guy for the Matrix. And the like whoever they had for like an agent or whatever, they're like, fine, we'll track this guy down. And they finally found him. And meanwhile, it's like while they were waiting for Jeff Darrow to be found, they were pitching the Matrix to different places in Hollywood, and no one wanted it. But then once they got a hold of Jeff Darrow, and Jeff Darrow's like, sure, I'll fax you over like a sketch or a drawing. He drew the power plant from the first Matrix, like the big power plant where
Yeah,
like all
yeah,
the
yeah.
people are in their little pods. It's this like insanely detailed drawing that apparently, like according to the stories, took like 7 hours to fax over.
Whoa. Okay.
Like the ink detail is that heavy that just the fax machine was just chugging it out, and it took like
It was
7 hours to print.
struggling. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. I'm putting it up on screen for people on YouTube. For anyone listening, search Jeff Darrow, GEOF space DARROW, Matrix Power Plant. And it's the first thing that pops up. And it's insane.
But the coolest thing about that drawing is like, they were having all this trouble pitching the movie. But then once they pitched the movie with his drawing, they're like, okay, we're in.
Yep.
So it's like The Matrix is one of those like, again, ubiquitous like tentpole movies that it's like you can't its impact on just movies in general can't be like measured. It's so high. But it's like it only got made because of an artist, like a concept artist made that happen.
Yeah, shout out
like,
to
that's so
concept
cool.
artists, because people, it's an unsung hero type of role in the industry. I feel like
Yes.
artists that want to study art understand what concept artists are and what they do and how their role is important for visual development.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, the general public doesn't understand because a lot of stuff doesn't leave, like, the studios. Nobody really sees concept
Right.
art
Right. Mm-hmm.
unless like a
That's
book
not
gets
what's on
released.
the screen that everyone pays to see.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and eh, FromSoft is the as a game developer, they do like phenomenal concept art, and they try
Mm-hmm.
and incorporate like concept art into the game design because like
Mm-hmm.
that's how much like Miyazaki respects the field.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's From Software is like right as of right now. I think like they are the best developer. Like they can't be beaten, in my opinion.
Well, they're also releasing Armored Core 6, which is like, man, that's all I really wanted like lately. Just like a good like,
Well, it's like I've never played a single Armored Core, but it's just like I am so interested now because like those games seem like I'm glad that from what I've heard, the new Armored Core doesn't seem to be like, oh, we're not gonna try and like they're not trying to just appeal to like Soulsborne people
good.
because it's like clearly that's how they've made all their money, and it's like it would clearly like be a good business move to always kind of like pander Soulsborne fans. But they're like, no, this is an Armored Core game. We're making it for Armored Core fans. You're like, good, good.
Because Armored Core also has some of my favorite concept art in games too. Because the mech designs are phenomenal and just the landscapes are very.
Hmm.
A lot of them are barren and empty, but they get this like dread because the whole point of the Armored Core franchise is just like the world is destroyed because corporations just like fought for special interests for themselves, and all these resources like got and pollution in the air just destroyed the surface of the planet, and now like we have like mercenaries fighting on behalf of like corporations to like get control of the world.
Hmm.
It's but like they really captured that sort of bleak environment Armored Core concept art, and they
Well,
also
it's
have
like it's not
phenomenal
just how
soundtracks.
yeah, it's like it's not just how bleak it is, but it's like the other thing that's so like scary looking about those games is like the scale.
Yeah.
The scale is just massive, and you're just like there's no human civilization left, but there's just these like machine husks, and you're just like, God, that's horrible.
Machine husks, barren environments, and just and your Armored Cores, like the actual machines, the next are like an Armored Core 4 answer is the next is the name of the machines, and they are the ones that are bigger than Armored Cores, and
Okay.
they are what you pilot, and they are hyper massive. They're like 20, 30-story tall buildings in the size of like robots,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's what's moving around hyper massive landscapes, and you see even bigger machines in the distance that are like
Yeah.
doomsday devices, and it's such an interesting franchise to look at it from like that holistic view. They're very good at capturing, like FromSoft has always been good at capturing just like dire situations.
Oh, yeah. But without it ever feeling like too edgy or try hard.
Yeah.
Like there's always been like a reason behind why their worlds are so bleak.
Oh, for me, the most horrifying thing I've seen in a Soulsborne game was, do you remember the Old Hunters DLC in Bloodborne?
Oh, really?
Right before Ludwig, the bloodstream, there's a gate with this skeleton banging.
Oh yeah, who like when you kill him, he just makes the most awful noise.
Yeah, but I remember
Yeah.
playing the game for the first like that part of the game for the first time, and walking
Hmm.
up to that section, and I hear a banging, and I'm like, what's that? And I go and I see what was like causing the noise to happen, and I was just sitting there for like 5 minutes. I was like, whoa, this is just extremely dark. This is
Oh yeah. That I think like the thing that I also love so much about From Software is like level design. Is like the level design itself is like a build up, like a cutscene almost. Like, and I think like the old Hunters is probably their best work doing that, because like you come out in this horrible nightmare landscape that's just like twisted and just like intense as hell. Like you get in there and you're just like running for your life all the time.
Yeah.
But then it's like you come across that big river of blood, and it's like you can tell that it's like it's flowing from somewhere. What's the source of this blood? So it's just like every step closer you get to the source, and then you find Ludwig, who Ludwig is still to me like, their best like set piece they've ever
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
Like
It's one of my favorites.
it's just like immaculately done, and then like the dynamic music is just like holy shit.
Yeah.
So
It was a very good fight. I still have a huge soft spot for Demon Souls. It's still my favorite
oh,
Souls game.
Demon Souls is like the weirdest game to like revisit after playing all their modern games, because like Demon Souls is so janky, but that's why I love it. Like,
For me, it's I feel like the environments in Demon Souls still make me feel there's a deep nostalgia that I feel for them, and like
mhm.
I I have them like just by personality and tone. I still have everything in Demon Souls like internalized in my memory, not just like by playing
Oh
it,
yeah.
but just like the feelings that I got, like the anxiety that I felt playing that game.
Well, there's something like really unique about Demon Souls atmosphere, and it's like I highly doubt all of it is intended. You know,
Mhm.
because it's like there are this like Demon Souls is it's from the studio that it's like this is pre Dark Souls, so they don't have like all this money to work with. So it's like there is this like sense of like sparseness that due to like lack of budget. But
Yeah,
meanwhile, it's just like emptiness, just like it's probably still the most like desolate and depressing world they've made after all these years. Even though it's like they have all these games that's like, oh, you can really like up the horror or up the atmosphere. It's like no, Demon Souls still feels the most like hopeless of any of their games.
and the very end of Demon Souls 2, where the Great One is revealed, and I still like the build up to that moment because like you're spending the whole game theorizing about like where the source of everything of Solars comes from in the world, and then you get this like massive reveal to it, and like the majesty that it comes into frame, it's just like this giant wooden eldritch monster that descends
Mhm.
and
Like
approaches
what
you.
like but it's like but the way it's presented, it's like it doesn't look like there's like a thought in that thing's body. Like it just looks like this brainless thing, but you're like but it's so majestic at the same time. It's
Yeah,
so cool.
Demon Souls is I still like, and just the environment around it too. All the swords you see in the distance and peeking out of its like back.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like again, FromSoft has done phenomenal storytelling in terms of just visuals alone, and I'm excited to see
Oh
what they
yeah,
do with Armored Core 6 now that they have modern FromSoft money.
right. Well, it's like because it's like the other cool thing that like a lot of people can accuse them of being lazy, I guess, but I never would. But I do like honestly find it really charming and cool how much they like reuse ideas and like try to make them better.
Hmm.
They're not always successful, but like I was watching this like Elden Ring lore video or something, but they're talking about the Radahn fight from Elden Ring,
Right.
which I think is like the coolest fight in that game. Um,
I
but
wish I
there's
died.
this guy who's
I wish I
playing
died
out.
for that fight, so I could like experience it proper.
Hmm.
Because I just
But
kind
the
of blasted through it. I feel bad.
oh yeah, yeah. um, but this one YouTuber was pointing out that the entire concept for the Radahn fight was actually taken from an Armored Core game,
You know what?
where like
I'm trying to think of which fight in particular. Well, probably is it for
I
answer?
It might be like it's like this giant like flying fortress or
Oh,
something that like you
oh,
start out like 10 miles away from it,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
first have to like get close to it, and then once you're there, then you have to like take out its turrets or something.
yeah. Armored Core 4 answer has
Okay,
that setup.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just like it's cool that how they can even take like a boss fight from like a completely different game and we'll go like let's retool it for Elden Ring and probably make it into the most unique boss fight in the game.
That's oh, I love yeah. FromSoft does a really good job at just revisiting.
I'm my excitement is through the roof for the DLC for Elden Ring. It's like in the
I
way that like because like Bloodborne is my favorite game of all time,
mhm,
and
mhm.
it's like the Old Hunters DLC is the best content of that game,
Yes, I agree
and it's
wholeheartedly.
just like, and I feel like their DLCs have always been that way
Mhm,
because
mhm.
it's like their DLCs have this way of like we're gonna take what we learned from the main game and just learn more, make it better, but then also tell the same story but in a like really concise way. Like this is where we really hone in on what the game is about. So I'm wondering how Elden Ring is gonna do that. Just because it's like it's such a like intimidatingly massive game. I'm just wondering how they're gonna kind of like uh, compartmentalize it into this like smaller reiteration of the same themes.
I feel like it
I don't
might
know.
be their most massive DLC that they're attempting.
Oh yeah, I've heard some like leaks and rumors about like it's gigantic, which I'm like, well, I'm all for that.
The base game was just super huge. So
hmm
hearing about a DLC that's like if it rivals the base game in terms of mass, I feel like okay, that's pretty much a second game at that point, like a direct
Oh yeah.
sequel.
And
But
it's like in that way, it's like, well, then I don't mind waiting 2 years for
yeah,
it.
that's fine. I'm still because when Demon Souls came out, I was I've been an Armored Core fan my entire life. Um,
hmm
ever since like I remember like playing on the PS1, like when I was very little, like 7 to 8 years old, and just messing around with the
hmm
Armored Core games. I remember, yeah, I really like this stuff. And then like FromSoft, I've like developed them into like they're the company that makes like some of my favorite games. And when they released Demon Souls, I'll be honest, I hated Demon Souls in the very beginning because I was just like
hmm
coming off of four answer and then going into this like extremely slow game that was very punishing at the time.
Oh, an incredibly unfriendly game. Yeah.
And not to say like Armored Core is also a very unfriendly series, but it's like a very quick game, and like prep time is like how you define the difficulty in the Armored Core games. In Demon Souls, it's just the pacing was not the same at all. The way how you handle your stamina, the way how you do everything in that game, I was
Well,
just like,
and you are like really just thrown into the deep end in those kinds of games.
yeah. And then I played it and I was like, I hate this game. And then it wasn't until Dark Souls came out
hmm
that I revisited Demon Souls, and then I was like, okay, everyone's talking about Dark Souls nowadays. Let me go back to Demon Souls and let me like finish that off. And then like
hmm
okay, and then I really appreciated Demon Souls, and then like I started to love the Soul series from that point on, and then I started to be like, okay, you know what, not Armored Core, FromSoft is just a good video game company. They make good games
Oh yeah.
consistently.
Well, it's like last year I even tried out playing Kingsfield, and it's
Oh
because like they're rough. Like I'm not gonna lie, like playing one of those like first person dungeon crawlers where it's like your turning speed is like a snail. It's like
yeah, the it's tank
it does not
control.
feel
Yeah,
good. It does not feel good, but you're like, but I still like I kind of love this though. Like it's so charming, and it's still like there are still hallmarks in that game that they're still using. Like they still like have the whole like they have all the bullshit of like hidden doors and like invisible walkways and
yeah.
stuff, and
From
like
I mean,
hidden stats on your weapons that they never tell you about.
a lot of what they did in Armored Core, they also like learned from uh that game, Kingsfield, from that series, because Armored Core also has hidden doors in like a very and like things off the beaten path, and the first game was like similar control scheme where you're just moving and turning around in like a very weird way. But yeah, and again, Armored Core has the Moonlight Greatsword, which was first introduced in Kingsfield. It's just a fun series. Like they love their games. Is
Yeah, and it's like, and I think like going back also to like, I think the main reason that solidifies like Capcom and FromSoft as my two favorite video game developers is that like, again, like they love what they make. Like they're not ashamed of it at all. Like I remember this one YouTuber who like really loves Capcom. He was talking about like how, you know, it's like Capcom will make like these big crossover fighting games, and they'll put in some character that like no one has seen in like 20 years. Like here's some obscure arcade character we used to have. We're gonna put him in here for no reason, and you're like, who else does that? Like Capcom's like the only one who still gives a shit about like every single one of their weird little characters,
yeah,
like no matter how popular they are or whatever. Like obviously they play favorites, but it's still like they're never gonna like throw these characters out ever.
exactly, yeah. They put a lot of work into developing those characters that they might as well like put them somewhere or give them some use instead of like letting them dust up and not get any
Well,
like
yeah. Well, it's like, and I know that the guy directing Street Fighter 6, like I think he manages another Twitter where he just goes through Capcom's art archives and like just scans them in. And you're like, you preserved all of this. Like he showed off like the original like watercolor drawings of like those win and lose portraits from Street Fighter 3.
oh,
And you're just
that's
like seeing the original like traditional drawings of those, just like who, like no other company does this. Like they save all of it. It's incredible.
all right. I think now we can start moving on to the listener questions or the questions from
Yeah.
Twitter. All right. Let's see how we can go off of these. All right. The first one that I'm going to be reading off tonight is from you at Gio Ume Jr. on Twitter.com. And Gio asks, well, second time is the charm. And so I ask, what favorite thing add to the remake? Well, I'm going to read it as is and I'm going to interpret it afterwards. What you are thankful to God and what thing you wish didn't remove from Resi 4 remake. So I think what he's asking for is what do they add to the Resi 4 remake that you enjoyed? What are you happy that they didn't remove? And I guess what are you sad that they removed?
I think like really the only things that bothered me about the game were just certain like mechanical things. Like I will die on the hill that Ashley in the original Resident Evil 4 is like a perfect escort. Like she's really good at like obeying what you tell her to do.
Yeah.
Like she just works perfectly and she's never annoying. Like everyone's saying she was awful is just like you were probably just really bad at the game.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. They didn't know how to
Whereas
manage.
Whereas like the new Ashley, that whole like stand or like follow close and follow far or whatever it is, like she doesn't do what she's supposed to do. And there's so many times where like I'll tell her to stand back, but then she'll like run in front of me as I'm shooting someone and then duck. And I'm like, I told you to stay back. So it's just like I don't know why they changed that. That kind of annoyed me.
I wish for what I wish that they did with Ashley. I wish she had a standstill button where it's just like just sit here while I handle the rest.
Yeah, like that would have been better. Mm-hmm.
But aside from that,
But,
what are you thankful that they like kept from the original game?
Well, I'm glad that they I'm glad that they kept how goofy it was intact and perhaps made it like even goofier somehow. I don't know how they did that, but they did. Or at least like certain parts of it, like the whole Luis Leon like minecart thing. I was just like, this
Yeah.
is so silly. Like this is even sillier than the original.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm all for it. But yeah, and it's like probably my favorite additions were just like story stuff. Like I think like the cutscenes in this game are really good.
I agree. Yeah.
I think if there's like another thing I miss though slightly though is like I wish there was more codec calls with the villains. Like I think the villains had a bit more personality in the original.
Yeah,
But
they had
feel like
that movie camp, that action movie camp to them.
yeah.
For me, so is I'm gonna be very annoying with it. I'm upset that they removed the lava room from the original castle. You
Oh, the
remember
one
that?
with like yeah.
Or the truck sequence, if you remember the truck sequence from RE4,
Oh, I do.
where Ashley was just driving the thing, or the laser hallway. Okay, this is what I'm upset about. So I'm glad that they kept it in, like, you know, where Leon sits on the throne, and he's just like, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
this is no time to be like, you know, sitting around or waiting around. I'm glad that they
Mhm.
had that there, but I'm so upset that they did not have the laser hallway leading up to it, because that thing was
Yeah.
stupid. But like, you know,
Oh, I know. I think like what I'm predicting is because it's like I don't know if you really want to like avoid spoilers or whatever, but I think most people know by now is like they cut U3, the big
yeah,
weird like monster out of the game.
that sequence, yeah.
But it's like in the original, that chapter of the game is so bizarre because it's the laser room. Or no, it's like it's a fight with Krauser,
Yeah.
I think. And then the laser room. And then another fight with Krauser, and then U3, like all in the same chapter.
Yeah, that it was.
And it's like it's packed. And I'm wondering because I think it's pretty much like more or less confirmed at this point that they're also remaking that Separate Ways side campaign
With
the one
Ada,
where you
yeah.
play as Ada.
Mhm.
I feel like they're gonna put the laser thing in her campaign.
You know what?
She's acrobatic,
Okay, fair enough. I'll take it.
and I feel like she's gonna fight U3 because there's like lore items in this remake that like build up U3
Yeah.
even though he doesn't appear. So I think they just kind of took that segment from the game and are putting it in Separate Ways. Because the original Separate Ways is honestly not that good.
There's not much that happens in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Okay, you know what?
That's my
that's a
theory.
good argument. Yeah. I feel like I agree with you. I feel like that makes sense. That holds true. So I hope that answers your question, Gio. Moving on to the next one. Zio or Zioluax at ZYOLLUAX on Twitter says, any advice on ways to gain a following? As a writer, I kind of find it hard to build one. Whoo boy.
Yeah, that's a really tough one because it's like, it's like as an artist, and you are too. Like you're very aware of how like making it as an artist is tough. It's hard, but I feel like making it as a writer, like I know this doesn't sound encouraging, but like it might be harder. I don't know. And maybe that's just like from my perspective because like I find writing really difficult.
So
But
I got advice for both.
oh, how to gain an audience?
Well,
But yeah, go on.
okay, this is not really advice for a following. It's more of you sort of have to get lucky, but it's not just getting lucky. You have to
Right.
You have to get lucky, but you have to capitalize off of it too. You have to realize, you know, that there's a momentum that's building because of like something somehow got recognized by somebody, and
or just like keeping your ear to the ground of like what's going on in your field, kind of thing.
that's a mixed bag because sure you can do that, but like if you're gonna do something like that, you need to be able to offer something to people who are also doing that, you know. So
Right. Mhm.
and if you're going to do that, like, keep your ear to the ground and follow, like, trends or something that's happening, you need to be very, very good. You need to stand out like crazy, and
Mhm.
that's, I don't recommend that to people, because you need to be the best of the best if you're going to be doing something like that.
Yeah, I think like the only reason I mention it is because, like, for example, when like we were talking about like websites we used to be on, and like I was on DeviantArt for a really long time. Then I kind of didn't like posting there, so I posted to Tumblr.
Hmm.
But as we all know, Tumblr, lost half of its user base when it banned NSFW stuff.
Yep.
So I was kind of like, well, I guess I will follow everybody to Twitter. But as I happened to be leaving Tumblr and going to Twitter right as everyone else was in that like mass exodus or whatever,
Right.
I got like retweeted and seen by like just the right people. Because like
Yeah.
one of the first artists to retweet my stuff on Twitter was Spaz Kid.
Spaz Kid. Yeah.
Yeah, Corey's great. I love Corey,
Yeah.
but it's like he was one of the first people to like retweet me, and I think he scouted me on Newgrounds too.
Hey, shout out to Spaz Kid.
But it's like it's not like that's like the sole reason why I got an audience. It's like once he retweeted me and I got like a bunch more people following me, I'm like, I really got to take advantage of this, like, and post a lot, and like make a name for myself or whatever. Which, again, it's like there's no, a lot of the time, like you said, it's like a lot of it is luck, and you can't really like count on luck. But there's like
So
a certain being seen by the right people at the right time.
so
But
here's my
it's like,
personal journey within social media on Twitter. I was on
mhm,
artist for a long time. Art's a very relatively new thing for me. It's within the last like 6-7 years for me, in particular.
mhm.
And but I was a part of fighting game Twitter, like the FGC. This is before
Okay.
Tumblr Exodus or anything like that. I was just a part of the fighting game community. I was very into Skullgirls, and I drew
Mhm.
whatever like stupid like dumb Skullgirls art I did at the time. I did not gain a big following, but like like not through my art, not at all, but like just being a part of the FGC and participating with the fighting game community. And
Mhm.
the fighting game community is big sometimes, and like as I started to develop as an artist, people from the fighting game community started to recognize that, and then like big people from the fighting game community that recognized me like retweeted my art sometimes, and like other people from like other communities saw that, and then
Right.
like that's how that grew. Like I went from fighting games into like art Twitter. I still like fighting games, I still talk about fighting games, but like
Mhm.
that journey of like you find your niche kind of, and like work towards your niche, and then like at some points your niche can expand from like that one particular thing that you did
Right.
and
And
grow
and I
into
and I
something
think
else.
that's, yeah, that's, I think, very good advice, because it's like a lot of people think that like all I have to do, or I have to like follow trends. It's kind of like if you maintain like a consistent presence with a
Yes.
niche, eventually it'll grow outside that niche.
Yeah.
I feel like
um
I've always found that that's happened. So I think that might be the best way to frame it, as like advice.
yeah.
Like stick to a niche and just like maintain a presence, like interact with other people,
Yeah.
like
People in the similar
that.
niche too, like just be around people that appreciate your work first and foremost. As
Hmm.
far as writing advice, how to like build a following as a writer, so okay, here's my thing. Being a
Okay.
writer in this day and age is extremely difficult, and growing as a writer, because
Hmm.
especially a writer online, you can grow as a
Yeah.
writer but not online is the thing. You need to go into writing communities, and they are very sectioned off. Twitter, like, for example, Twitter is not the place to show off writing, because it's just not built for it whatsoever.
Mm.
But being a
Right.
writer is extremely difficult nowadays, because just nobody reads anymore. And
Yeah, I mean, or at the very least, it's like go to the places where there are big like reading
Where
communities. Like
people read.
my
Yeah.
yeah, like my brother is like he's also an artist, but he also like he's gotten really into like reading like fantasy books, like
Mm-hmm.
sword and sorcery stuff. He's gotten a big like a decent sized following on TikTok because like there's this whole book talk is like a section of TikTok where just everyone talks about books. So
Interesting.
maybe
Well,
just like
maybe.
going to like not that I ever recommend like going to Reddit or whatever, but it's just like go to those kind of like specialized communities where there's people like you and where you can like network with and grow with.
I have another bit of advice. So I started off as a writer. I used to write plays. I used to write scripts and dialogues and
Oh,
short stories and poetry. That's how for me, I started all my creative pursuits via writing. And storytelling is always something that I've wanted to do. I've started to learn as like I developed more and more into it that writing is not enough. Like an audience, like a more modern day younger audience, they don't like reading, or like
or at the very least, like their attention span, they're just like they're short. They're very short.
and it's not conductive to sharing online because you're asking a lot of people's attention. So take your writing skills and like I know it sucks. Ideally, you would just work as a writer. Like that's what I would do. Ideally, in an ideal world, I would just write books, but that's not the world I live
Mm,
in, and that's not the way how I can get my stories out to as many people as possible. But take your writing skills and do something else with them. Like this is such a cop out answer, but like see how video essays could do for you. Like write video essays or like write narratives that you can like record and voice act, or like tell a story in like a video format via like the
right.
writing that you've made.
Well,
And
and it's like yeah, and it's like even like some of the writers that I've kind of interacted with through Twitter are usually people like one of my friends, like he writes like erotica stuff,
mhm,
and he commissions me to sometimes draw his stories or like characters and whatnot. So it's like even interacting with artists to kind of like collaborate with and use your stories for
yeah,
might be another good avenue.
it's I'm like when I heard like being a writer, I just like I felt sympathy right there because it's so tough to be a writer. It's so
Yeah,
extremely tough to be a writer
well,
in
I
this
can't
day and age.
imagine. Yeah,
Like it's not even about the skill of being a writer. It's getting people to read what you're writing, and
well,
that's tough.
yeah, and especially like on social media platforms like Twitter, where it's like the main draw for Twitter is short form writing, like very short. And I know that recently it's like, oh, if you get the blue check mark, you can have more characters in your tweets or whatever. But it's just like it's not the best platform to showcase writing.
Yeah, sadly. So again, to summarize what we've said as advice, just find your niche, go to a place where your niche will appreciate what you're doing, and then try and expand from there.
Because it's like also like being around people who appreciate your work is like so important,
Yeah,
like for your own just confidence and motivation for doing it.
finding
Because it's like I know
peers.
we all like to think that we can just like make art for ourselves, but it's like you do want other people to see it.
Yeah,
You do want other people to read it and enjoy it.
finding peers. Less so people that are like followers of your work, but like finding people that like you feel are on the same level as you, and interacting with them, and
Mhm.
then i- engaging in a sort of community, and then essentially that will build, and then be open to collaborating because that's what people do. People are very social, and if you're able to like
Mhm.
find someone to collaborate with, then you might have a better chance to get your writing out there. But yeah,
Right.
that's pretty much all I can say. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
I think that's probably as much as I can say too.
All right.
But yeah,
Hope that answers your
hope,
questions,
hope
Yo.
that helps. Yeah.
Next up is at CZQ 133 for Neil.
Oh yeah, it's one of my best friends. Yeah.
He commissioned me to do something in the past before too, and I really like doing that drawing for him. But yeah,
Oh, he makes great like he does like custom medical builds and stuff. They're really cool.
yeah. He asked for Neil. You know a lot about comics from the 70s and 90s, but are there any contemporary
Mhm.
comic books and comic illustrators whose work you enjoy?
And obviously, you feel free to answer this too. Probably like I usually like gravitate toward those like artists who kind of have like that old soul, like like the people who appreciate the art that I appreciate. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's this contemporary guy named James Heron. He does like really like I know he does stuff for Marvel and DC sometimes, but he also has like his own series called Rumble, where it's just like these really bizarre like 70s and 80s looking characters, but in this like kind of heavy metal landscape. It's like, but his inking is gorgeous.
Yeah, I've always
Um,
I've been wanting to buy Rumble for the longest time because I peep it in like every single comic book shop, and like all the covers look phenomenal to it, and I'm just like, what
well,
could
that's
this possibly be
like,
about?
oh yeah, and especially like when you'll get like a guest artist to do like a variant cover, and it's like
Hmm.
one of these old timey guys, and you're like, damn, that's so cool. Like one of my favorite artists ever is this artist named Richard Corbin. He was another heavy metal guy,
Hmm.
but his stuff was like he did the story that was Den in the heavy metal movie, the bald naked
Oh,
barbarian
okay,
guy.
okay, 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 okay.
But his work is like renowned because it's like he was having like really realistic lighting and like airbrush effects and comics that generally didn't go that elaborate at the time.
Hmm.
But it's like he did a cover to Rumble, and you're like, oh, that's so sick. Like so clearly, like this James Heron's like looking at the same stuff I like. But another comic artist I really like who has a really bizarre style that is this guy named Jacob Rabelka.
Can you
I
repeat
hope
that?
I'm not like mispronounced. Jacob Rabelka. I think it's like his last name is Rebelka, and Jacob is spelled Jakub.
Got it. Because I spelled that completely wrong. Rebelka, yeah.
But like, but it's like his art. It's like, especially for comic book art, it's like it almost kind of reminds me of like Gustav Klimt or something. Like very, like lots of patterns and like
Hmm.
flat graphic work, but like done with this like really, like just a lot of sensitivity that I like. But one comic he did that I found really interesting was he did a comic about like Judas.
Oh,
But
was that the one with like Oh, I think I read this one.
like where Judas like goes to hell
Tell
and kind
yes,
of
yes, yes.
like
This was a phenomenal
is
comic. I didn't know
yeah.
this was the guy. I should have looked into it more.
But no, yeah, that guy's art and that comic is just amazing. Like
It,
it's really like it's because it's like I grew up Christian, and like Christian media is usually like so lame and boring and stupid.
yeah, no.
Whereas it's like this, but meanwhile, like stuff that's like critical of it kind of tends to be like really edgy and you know cliche in its own way.
No, this is very
Whereas it's like this,
celebratory. Judas is a very celebratory, like like the lessons of like the Bible, and like Jesus as like
right? But like done in a very like thought provoking way
yeah.
with
It,
great art. So it's just like this is great. I
no,
love this.
I remember buying this specifically because like I was like, oh man, I should have looked into like the people that made it. But like I remember reading this and like this is like some of the best compositions I've ever seen
Hmm hmm
in anything ever. The uses, the color scripting for that whole comic was just phenomenal. The deep blues of hell to like going away from God's light and all that.
Mhm.
imagery and fallen angels, and conceptually it was a extremely well written story. Beautiful, beautiful colors. I remember sharing it with as many friends as possible when I first was reading it because I was like, guys, look at this. This is just really cool. But yeah,
Mhm.
I would agree.
And
Like
then
this,
if I had like, yeah, no, and if I had one last, like, I don't know how modern it is because it's like whenever I think of like modern people, I still think to like maybe early 2000s. Like I admittedly don't look at a whole lot of like super current comic book art, mainly just because I find like the cape stuff, boring. Like,
got you. There's a whole world of comics
but
outside the Cape, but like, yeah,
I know that, but it's just like, but what's being promoted is the cape stuff, which is like, so it
exactly.
makes the other stuff hard to find. But uh, there's this one comic artist named Guy Davis.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Guy Davis is good.
love his stuff. Like he might be like one of the best, if not like the best, like living like monster designer. Like his
Mm-hmm.
creatures are fucked looking. Like they're
Yeah.
they're disturbing. But my favorite comic of his also happens to be like one of the only like horror comics I really truly love, and it's The Marquis.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the Marquis was
like
great. Yeah.
yeah, it's spelled like Marquis or whatever.
Yeah,
But
Marquis. Yeah.
I like it had to have been like an inspiration on Bloodborne as far as just like the aesthetic. It's like you have all these Venetian masks and just horrible
Mm-hmm.
monsters against these like really heavy religious undertones or overtones or whatever. But that's like an actually like because it's like horror comics are a frustrating genre. I think like a lot of the time you could get like a good story, but like the art kind of betrays the story. Like
Yeah.
you'll have
Yeah.
like a cool sounding story, but then the art's like in a different story, this art would be cool, but for a horror story, I can't take it seriously.
It's not getting the
So
atmosphere the right way.
right,
Yeah.
or it's just like I know that horror movies and horror media of any kind has like that. It has that. What's the word like? Like it has to be scary. It has to be
Yeah.
creepy in
Yeah.
order to be considered like successful or good.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't always entirely agree with. Like there's plenty of horror movies I love and I think are amazing movies, but they don't like scare me.
Yeah, they're not
But
inherently like horrifying. For me, the one that comes off the top of my head is In the Mouth of Madness. Not In the Mouth of Madness. In the Mind of Madness. I forget what it was, but like the exact title of the movie. I'm gonna look it up real quick right now. It's I don't want to give it away too much, but it's a psychological horror and it's not inherently horrifying, but like the way how it creeps up on you and like when you consider the situation at hand, that's where the true horror like lies in. But it's never overt. It's not in your face.
mm-hmm.
In the Mouth of Madness, yeah, 1994.
Is that the John Carpenter one?
Yep, John
I mean,
Carpenter's
oh,
In the
okay,
Mouth of
okay,
Madness.
yeah. No, that one's a good one. But it's like even that one has like some like intentionally kind of like campy moments to it, which I find entertaining.
True, but I love that end to that
Oh
story.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's very good.
But yeah, like I know there's like a lot of like I can like think of like a lot of good artists that are working in contemporary comics, but I haven't like read any like particular stories they've done. Like there's this one Marvel artist named Goran Parlov, I think. Goran is his first name, and then Parlov.
Oh, got you.
Very,
But
very, European style looking stuff. But like his art's really cool, but it's like, for stuff like The Punisher, which I don't really have much interest in reading. So I can't say if like it's actually a good comic, but his art's good.
I'm checking out his stuff on Twitter right now. He is on Twitter. Goran
Yeah,
Parlov.
yeah, it is.
for anybody like wondering, and you can go check it there. He has very fun compositions.
Very just distinct line work, which I always love.
Oh, he's
And
done
then I
stuff
know
for
another
Punisher too.
artist.
Interesting. I gotta read.
I know that another one of my favorite, like an artist that I think has like a really good handle on just like composition and like that kind of like economic use of line. Is that David Aja? AJA is his last name. He did like Hawkeye stuff.
Yeah. I've seen a
Like
lot of these.
never read Hawkeye, but it's just like this guy's stuff's really cool.
Very good, simple. Using minimal lines to convey form, emotion, facial expressions. Yeah, I really like his stuff. I gotta read some Hawkeye now, I guess.
And again, it's like I'm not gonna like make this blanket statement that all like superhero stuff is like poorly written or badly constructed. Like I'm sure a lot of it is good. It's just like I'm so burnt out on that subject matter. Like
I feel you.
It's so oversaturated, and I feel like it's right now. It's kind of, I don't know. I feel like superhero stuff in general is kind of like singing its swan song right now. Like, I feel like it's kind of dying out.
Because I feel like there's fatigue, like audience fatigue. There are too many of these like shows and movies coming out that people are just like exhausted.
Right.
In terms of comics, it's been like comic fatigue has been going on for the past like 20 years now.
Oh well, it's like it's funny too. Like thinking about like the trends that tend to like kill out comic books have been like this repeated problem. And like I remember when like my dad collected stuff like heavy metal and alternative comics like in the early 80s. The main reason why he was looking at that stuff was because he found like the Marvel and DC stuff. They started doing those big like crossover type events, like where you had to like, oh, in order to keep up with this storyline, you need this issue of Captain America, this issue of Daredevil, and this issue of Spider-Man. And it's like
Infinity Wars, Secret Wars was a big problem. Like back, I mean, like they were cool storylines and everything, but like
sure, yeah,
the convolution for like an average reader to like pick up on everything, and like
right.
you're seeing like a bunch of these characters that like you have all this implied chemistry based off of like previous works. It makes it difficult for people to just jump in and accept everything for what it is. People like standalone stories.
Implied chemistry from previous works, but from an entirely different series. It's just like how like you need to buy all of it to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and
I feel like that's just constantly they keep making the same problem. Like they don't do enough standalone stuff.
As much as I love the movie Spider-Verse, like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and as much as I love Spider-Man, and as much as I love like particular Spider-Man,
yeah,
boy do I hate the Spider-Verse comics. Boy do I dislike them. They are so just they are that problem, that crossover problem, because you need to like you need to understand Spider-Gwen. You need to understand Miles Morales, Amazing Spider-Man,
Spider-Ham, all that. Yeah.
Well, no, Spider-Ham is a completely separate thing. I don't even consider that part of like like I'm speaking strictly comics.
Gotcha.
And then like all these like storylines come in together into the Spider-Verse, and then what's actually happening within Spider-Verse is extremely annoying. And like character assassination by the writers. For like the other characters, like because you're handling another like Spider-Man from another person that like doesn't necessarily agree with your vision of what Spider-Man has to be. And I mean Gerard Way did a cool Spider-Man, like for Penny Parker. He was the one that like introduced like the Mecha Spider, did that storyline and everything within Spider-Verse, and that was cool. But then, like, the rest of Spider-Verse is just, oh, man.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
now the second movie's coming out, and I'm starting to feel that fatigue from the
Yeah.
comics, because I'm just like, oh, I see Miguel having vampire teeth in that one
Mhm.
frame, and I'm like, oh, they're bringing the vampire conflict into Spider-Verse.
Oh boy.
I don't know how I feel
Mhm.
about this, but yeah. I, I, I say that as I'm the person that buys and reads these things. I'm part of the problem.
No, I'm like, again, it's like I've never felt like comfortable with just like taking this like blanket like shit on superhero comics. I'm just like I've never really been into them that
Yeah.
much. Like as a kid, I always like loved Spider-Man as like a character, but I've never like read a Spider-Man comic book in my
You,
life. I don't think.
you might be for the better. Well, okay. Here's a recommendation I give anybody right now. It's a contemporary Spider-Man run that started in 2019 to 2020, or was it 2018 to 2019? Anyways, a Spider-Man life story is what I
Okay.
recommend for anybody if you're a fan of Spider-Man, and if you want a condensed view of like Spider-Man's history for the last like in comics for the last like 60, 70 years. It's a good peek into Spider-Man, because
Okay.
it's
Okay.
it's essentially like Spider-Man life stories. Peter Parker from like the the 40s when Spider-Man, or 50s, from the
Oh,
50s,
60s.
60s, yeah,
60s, I think. Yeah.
60s Spider-Man, like Peter Parker from that era, and you're growing up with him throughout the years. But like it's also like what were the current trends in Spider-Man of each era, right? And then
Mhm.
you go into like
So
the
it's just this like
ridiculousness that's like the
massive like condensation of it all, kind
yeah.
of.
And it's a good celebration of Spider-Man, and it's very
Yeah.
respectful to the character too. So
Oh,
if you like Spidey, just read Spider-Man life story. It's a phenomenal piece of work.
well, and it's like, and this might seem like a little contradictory of me to say, but it's like even though like all those like convoluted crossing over multiverse stuff is like really annoying, it's also like it's such a like goofy, like unique eccentricity about comic books that I kind of like can't help but at least find it entertaining an idea.
Okay, so my thing
like
with comics is comics are stupid. And like they're
yeah,
okay. They're okay. It's all right for them to be stupid. But
yes,
it's
yeah,
just
I
comic book nerds don't understand that, and I get very upset.
right. Ugh. Comic book nerds in particular, because it's like you also get the idea that they really don't read that much comic book stuff. I don't know. At least like most like MCU fans don't strike me as like comic book people.
Okay,
But
but okay, there's a huge asterisk to this, because like a lot of comic book people tend to really dive into comic books.
mm,
They
mm,
love they probably are more well read than I am, and I love comics, right? But like the people that
mhm,
make this their life and like their primary hobby, they care
yeah,
a lot, and they will know minute details that like don't really even matter to like narrative structure, but
hmm,
they will care about like it's like Dragon Ball Z nerds, and
right,
like how
right.
they go about power levels and all that, like, or like in One Piece, where they're just like who can beat who, and that's like this is where comic book nerds go. This is like the end goal of
Mhm.
comic book nerds. They completely forgo entire narrative structure, themes, character pacing. They don't
To
care about that.
talk about these really inane topics. Yeah.
Yeah, they care about like who can beat who in a fight. The consistent
Mhm.
Batman versus Superman debate, right? That
Right,
happens
right.
all the time, and it's just like and they keep referencing like what Batman did here, what Superman can do X, Y, and Z, but Batman with prep time can do whatever, and it's just like you guys,
Shut up.
it's
Yeah, I know.
it's it's whatever the writer wants to do.
Right. Well, it's like, and also like going back to the discussion of like comic books being generally like just stupid,
Yeah.
and there is this like inherent like, especially in the past like 10 years, as like comic book culture has gotten so mainstream, there's this kind of like desperation for people to like, I really need people to take my hobby seriously, and you're like,
Yeah.
no, no.
I no no
Like
I like
you
I
can't demand
understand that.
respect for that. It's just like, no.
Hobbies are hobbies, dude. They're not a life replacement.
Well,
Is the thing.
it's like it's like when you have like that last Spider-Man movie, the No Way Home,
Did
or
not see
I
it.
don't even whatever it was. It's like you had all these fans like clamoring for it to be like, this movie needs to be at the Oscars. It needs to be nominated for Best Picture and all that stuff. And you're like, can't you be good enough with the fact that it like beat all these box office records? Like, shouldn't that be validation enough for you? Like, why do you also need everyone to take them serious, like high art cinema?
Yeah,
like,
it's
because they're not. They're just not. And it's like that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but it's just like they're not that kind of movie. They're not an award movie, and you should be okay with that.
so this extends to a further topic of just you don't need to justify yourself to explain why
Oh
you
no,
like something. Nobody
right?
should feel like they need to justify their happiness to anybody else, or like why something like makes them happy. Like you either find people
Mhm.
that are like-minded, or you just ignore people that like disagree with you, right?
Right.
uh if it's purely, if you're just trying to have fun with something, just have fun with it. Don't even worry too much about it. Just enjoy it
Mm,
for what it is, and don't let other people bring your mood down because like
right.
they don't like it. You don't, who cares?
Hmm.
Who cares if they don't like
Yeah.
what you like? I
Right.
to me the funniest bit is just like whenever people try and like talk bad about Chainsaw Man or Berserk
Hmm.
online, and I'm just like, why do you care if I like it?
Right. Right.
Like, or like why do I have to
Well,
prove,
you're lost then.
yeah, why do I have to prove why I enjoy something to you when you obviously don't care about my
Yeah.
opinion?
Right.
So
Because
just
it's like
like,
I'm not going to convince you into liking this thing. You've
yeah,
made your
no,
mind up. You don't like
it's,
it,
yeah,
and that's
it's,
fine that you don't like it.
yeah, and we can just leave the discussion there. You don't need to make it like a whole like character assassination thing, or like well, if you do this then you're this way. It's just ridiculous. But anyway,
Yeah.
CZQ, I hope that answers like your question about like contemporary comic illustrators.
Mm,
I feel like we got like a good few of them thrown in there
yeah.
for people to like go into. Next up is Alpha Darian at Alpha Darian on twitter.com asks a question for both of you. When is it a good time to start commissions? And how do you go about doing so? Do you need a PayPal, a decent following, etc., etc.? So I'll let you start with that one.
Um, I think like having a decent following really, like it helps a lot. It just does. Because it's and because it's like, and you all have to start somewhere, of course. Like, when I first opened commissions, like starting off as a free, because like I did commissions when I was like 13 or 14 years old, and granted, like rarely got one, but like I kind of had to accept that, like, yeah, until I build a bigger audience, the commissions are just not gonna be there yet. So like the audience is definitely like a big thing. I wouldn't get like too discouraged if like they trickle in slowly, just because like that's just kind of the nature. Like as you build an audience, you will get more commissions.
That is very true, but I have some of my, and he asked like, do you need a PayPal? I mean, pick whatever you feel will get people paying for you. Like, what's the PayPal? I think is the
Yeah,
best one currently.
yeah, like, and it's because it's the most used.
Yeah, it's
Like
the,
that's why I use it.
yeah. Other people say Cash App.
Or
Do,
Venmo or
uh,
whatever. I don't know.
having multiple options available is better than nothing. I only have PayPal because I've only needed PayPal for myself. But like, you can have
Same here.
multiple different things, and you can give your commissioners an option to be like, hey, you can pay me through PayPal, Kofi, Cash App, Venmo, whatever. As long like you can settle that with your commissioners. But
Yeah, like I think like the main reason why I stick to PayPal is like I don't really know how the other platforms like work, like as far as the more specifics of how they work, but at least what I like about PayPal is the fact that you can make an invoice,
Yeah.
like you have control over what information is put out there, because like because it's like I know a lot of people try to like avoid fees of PayPal,
Hmm.
which don't do that. That's like the surefire way to get your account shut down and all of your assets frozen. Um, like
Goods and
slot,
services. It's always when you're doing
yeah,
something in PayPal for commission work, always listed as goods and services. Always pay people as goods and services. Do not do it to friends and family. Do not try and cheat out of it
right. Well, and
because
like, and the advantage with the invoice too is like if you just ask for like a request for money, the person sending you money can put like anything in the little like message box. And I've seen stories where like, dealing with NSFW art, like you ask, say, for $100 for a commission, and then someone puts in the message box, some really lewd description.
that's hilarious. I didn't. That hasn't happened with me yet.
But like, apparently PayPal doesn't allow you to make money doing lewd stuff. So it's like there's people who've been banned from Twitter because Twitter will kind of like troll those messages and go like, what is this?
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's why invoices are like, it's all in your control. You send it out, like you don't, like you can keep your the like message or like the description of what you're selling, like I keep it the vaguest thing possible, just so there's no one sniffing around.
I just do it like based off commission type, like pop art commission, that type of thing.
Right, yeah, I just do like one character illustration, that's all I
Yeah.
put. Hmm.
There's that element of it as far as the decent following goes. So there is no good or bad time to start commissions, but
Right.
to be more realistic about it, the most important thing I feel artists need is a good commission sheet.
Hmm.
More than having a following, I think you need a very good and clear and concise commission sheet. I mean I use my talents
A
as like
very easy way to be contacted.
yeah, you need to be easy to contact. You don't want people to read like paragraphs within your image, like your comp sheet. Like
Hmm.
you need to make things like simple for people to like, like you're advertising yourself, right? Think about
Hmm.
advertisements that you see, like again, you have to treat it like a business. Think about advertisements you see around like, outside, like you're going to the mall, you see like, hey, we're offering this deal on this thing, like this Shamrock Shake or whatever. Here's the promotion we're running on it, like McDonald's or whatever.
Hmm.
See how clear and concise the information is displayed to you. Whether or not you're going to buy it or not doesn't matter because someone else will. But like the idea is, it's clear.
You
You
need to
understand
well, you need to
what's.
present information that people can read in seconds.
Yeah, that's
Is
why.
ba-
That's why I make a commission video whenever I put up commission sheets,
Mm,
because I feel I'm able to direct people's eyes and attention. This is like the beauty of being like an animator or like a video
mm,
editor, because you
right.
you have the skill set to do something like that. And this is what I tell everybody: if you're able to make a commission video, just make a commission video. Tell people like, here's an example of X, Y, and Z of what I'm trying to do, and like here are my prices for these things. And do not like don't over explain yourself. You can discuss any surplus charges with your commissioner in DMs or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
But off the get go, just like
Well, that's also why in my commission sheets, like, because like you see all those commission sheets where it says like I will draw this, but I won't draw this. It's like I'll discuss that with the client. Like
yeah,
if they draw, like if they want me to draw something I don't feel like drawing, I'll just tell them in the email like no thanks,
yeah,
I don't want to
exactly.
draw
Yeah. Or like if you want to be more polite about it, just being like
that. Oh yeah, I'm just like summing up,
yeah,
But
just be like, oh hey, I don't think I'm the best artist for that type of thing
right,
that
yeah.
you're asking for in particular. And what I tend to do sometimes is I tend to recommend, like, if there's something that I cannot do in a commission that I know, like, it's not necessarily that I'm against doing it, but it's just like I know someone else could do it better. Sometimes I will refer to them to another artist, because
I've done that.
I get a lot of character design, like people ask me like, hey, can you like design a character for me? And I'm like, I can, but here's who you can go to that can do a better job at this than I can. And I will always refer to someone else. And
Right. Well, it's like even like I've been commissioned to draw like furries several times, and it's just like I'm not like against it, but it's just like it's not what I'm good at or known for. So maybe you should try this person. Like
yeah,
they're good at
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
hmm
And
Well, then, and that kind of attitude is also it's like it's paid forward. Like if say that furry artist doesn't draw humans, they're like, well, I don't draw that, but I can recommend and draw it for you. You know, like it'll be usually kind of come back to you sometimes.
yeah, so again, community is a big part of like, being an artist online. You need to like interact with people, interact with your peers. Um if you don't have a following, what I do recommend, when what people recommend to me like that have worked for them, is go to specific like Discord servers or communities that like have this, commission system. Like there are like specific Discords I know that exist. I haven't been to them, but like people have told me about them, where it's just commission Discords where artists post like, their commission sheets and everything, and then like commissioners would go and like look through like, the different sheets and pick out an artist there, and like, you can try that.
hmm Yeah, there's all sorts of tools like that at your disposal. So
But yeah, I hope that answers your question, Alpha Darian. Next up is Luna at Spacey Luna R18 asks, if there were two guys on the moon and one of them killed the other with a rock, would that be fucked up or what? I did not vet this question. I just read it as is. So
well, to answer your question, that would be pretty fucked up.
yeah, that sounds like I'm trying to think of like what's a similar situation to that. I don't know.
What, like, and broke the astronaut's helmet or something?
Yeah, like where an astronaut killed another astronaut, like in media.
Mm,
I feel like that exists somewhere, like, and that's in my brain in some way, but I can't like pick it out.
yeah.
But yeah,
Uh,
it would be fucked up, Luna. I'm glad you asked that question. Next up is at Vanilla Fox 1806 on Twitter. Asks, what's your favorite detail about your art style / the way you draw?
hmm. I just love drawing faces, like eyes in particular. I love drawing eyes and
I,
legs.
I can try and like point out what I like in your art in
Oh, okay.
specific to like, kind of like guide. I mean, the question was for like, what do you like in your own art, but like I feel like it's like, interesting to like look at like, what other artists like, appreciate about your stuff. But for you in particular, like you have like this really good sense of like line flow between like,
thank you.
your forms and how everything goes to each other. And your value work is just, it's very simple. I've seen like you've been simplifying how you do your values like throughout time, because like, I remember you used to be more airbrushy like way back, but now you've like simplified your colors and softened the cell shading a lot more.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been liking your development with that sort of experimentation,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
because it's just it really brings out like the actual shape of like the character and the form and the volumes. I'd be showing it on screen right now, but again, you do mostly not safe for work stuff as I'm scrolling through right now.
Right. Right.
But I really do like it, the proportions that you like bring to your characters. Do you use reference?
Oh yeah, I use reference all the time.
Okay.
So yeah, and like I would say that like any attitude people have like against using reference, like stamp that out. Like your drawings will only be strengthened if you use reference. Don't be like a slave to reference, but like it's always good to have reference. Like you're not cheating in any way if you use reference.
Yeah. No, I completely wholeheartedly agree. You don't need to. I mean, I personally don't use references, or if I do, it's very sparingly, depending on what I'm doing. Mostly in
Mm.
animation, I use references, but like otherwise, for illustration, is I haven't felt the need to, or I
Mm.
felt like my understanding of like what I want to do with my stuff can exist without reference. Like I know enough about anatomy and stuff to get it
Oh yeah.
accurate enough. Like, but
Well, and it's like, and that's what like I really like about your work is just how like it's rare to find like stuff like this heavily stylized, but like stylized so confidently. Like because it's like all the dynamic perspective and stuff. It's like almost like looking at your ultra stylized characters. It's like it's now that I've talked to you more, your architecture background is actually like oh you know what that makes sense, like I kind of see it in the way that you're able to like warp these forms in convincing ways even though you're like still like you know when to break rules and when not to.
yeah, uh, for me, like how like I don't know how I celebrate my own stuff. It's I think I just have fun. I think that's the
Yeah.
thing that I'm most like proud of with my art is I've learned how to have fun with literally every piece that I do, or enjoy like how to enjoy making every single piece, and this is like just to uh, detract a little bit from the like thought, but like I enjoy making art. That's like the very like my number one goal with any piece that I make is like I want to be able to have fun making it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I feel like, most like AI bros or like tech bros don't understand is that
Yeah.
I enjoy making art. It's not that like, it's not a process where I'm just like, "Oh god, I have to draw something to get like this idea out of my head."
Yeah, or even like just like it's not really that finished product, it's like it's the whole process is what
Yeah.
I enjoy. Like,
A lot of the
but
time I will enjoy the process of making something way more than the actual finished piece.
because it's like usually like when I'm done with something, it's just I kind of like I post it online and then forget about it.
Yeah, because like that's it, right? Because like what
Right.
else can you do once it's out there? It's just like
Hmm.
that's all there is left to it. But like, the time that it took to like make it is just like there's a lot of problem solving that goes into art, and that's what I like about drawing.
Yeah. And if I had to also like point out something more specific I like about my own art, it is being able to like carve out that at least like within the NSFW realm. I'm glad I've been able to kind of carve out this more like I feel like my art's good at just like celebrating human form because it's
Oh
like
yeah.
I like just a body's just fun to draw. I really like drawing the body and like I think like the favorite comments I've ever gotten on my art are when people tell me like, dude, like your character it like has my body type and it makes me feel confident in my body type or whatever. It's just like that's really cool. Like
Yeah,
that's what I like hearing the most
that's
because it's like
actually really
obviously
awesome.
like NSFW art is this kind of like I don't want to like shit on it by any means, but like there's definitely like an oversaturation of stuff that's like really like smutty or whatever, and it's just like I've never really been into that. And it's like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, really. It's just I'm glad I've been able to kind of carve out this very particular niche within this field.
It's I think I think that's a good way that you put about it. Like you celebrate the human form, and it's not necessarily like one type of form in particular that you put emphasis over the other. It's just like people are just interesting to look at,
Oh
and
yeah.
interesting to convey, and like people for the most part look at other people all the time, so it's nice to like have that like celebration. It's kind of like the old Greek sculptor mentality where they're just celebrating the human form, and that's why like they've
Mm-hmm.
made all those like sculptures and statues.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like, and that's also why I do like using references. Just like I do like kind of like indicating like fat and wrinkles, like imperfections, and like I like really over indicating like the knee and elbow, even though it's like most people would not think like, oh, the knee and elbow are sexy or whatever. It's just I like indicating it because it looks cool.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know.
again, we talked about Michelangelo earlier, and I'll talk about him again. Like he invents
Mm,
muscles that don't necessarily exist, but he's just trying to like evoke the form,
right.
and
Hmm.
like and only he can do that, like in the way that he does it. Uh,
Hmm.
like I draw not safe for work very occasionally, but like that's when you get like the most accurate to like the human form art out of
Hmm.
me, because like
Hmm.
once you strip the clothes and like the way how you have to simplify things, it's just very particular. I'm trying to find one. I'm sending you in the chat, for example, but like this was one that I was very proud of, like
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
past, and it's just there are things that I do in it, like this is all just like based off memory, like what I remember, like how the human form works, or like how like anatomy like moves around the body. And then I do
Right.
a few things that like the body wouldn't behave in that way, like in a still moment, but like think about like again pause and movement and how it would
Hmm.
respond in that way, and that's how I draw.
Right.
But you don't see that type of stuff out of me very often, where I'm just like particular about like how fat folds around like particular like bits of the body,
Hmm.
or like putting emphasis on like how the rib cage and back works, and like how that hooks into your hips, or all that type of stuff.
Right.
But yeah. Next question is from Sharkbait at Vic Vicnandy Daffy, or Vic and Andy by 11. Okay. I'm sorry that I got your at wrong. But Sharkbait asks, for NDA, when you draw Aubrey or her fam, you tend to make some rather wholesome or curious vibed art. Do you take inspiration from personal experiences or a special memory to go for that vibe? Or do you simply like to create warm art? Was that your intended vibe from the start? So, specifically with your Aubrey and characters of that relation.
Um, I mean, like, I think mostly it is just out of like wanting to create, yeah, that like warm kind of feeling. Like that's always been like a thing I've liked drawing with this character. Um, Obviously, it's like with some of these characters too. There's this kind of like sense of like that'd just be nice. Like I'd like to have that kind of thing. So there's this kind of like I don't know projection there, I guess.
Okay, that well,
But
let me see if I can expand on this thought, like to ask like a more like pointed sort of question for it. But what type of like emotions, or like how do you want your art with Aubrey and your other characters to resonate with people? Like, what do you want to convey with them?
I mean, I think like obviously it's like there is that bottom line of like I just want people to find her like entertaining, cute, like as this pinup kind of girl.
Mhm.
But I do want her like more than most characters in this realm to kind of just like feel like a person. Like she isn't just there to like even though a lot of my art is like posing, suggestively or whatever, it's
Mhm.
still like I want them to come across as like like this is maybe like a selfie she's sending to someone or a situation she's in rather than just like she doesn't have any agency and just exists to arouse people. I guess
Got you,
is the
got you,
best
got you.
way to describe it.
You remember Yutsuka?
Yes.
from like 2019 when everyone was posting about her.
Yeah, the Hungarian
Yep,
cartoon. Yeah.
by
Paul,
Justai,
P-A-L
yeah,
or
Pustai,
P-A-I.
Pustai, yeah, Pustai
Yeah.
Paul. But like
Mhm.
it had like I feel like you have that sort of semblance with her as how he
Yes.
had, like, it was just like, yes, sure, she's evocative, like kind of like Betty
Mhm.
Boop almost, but like she's her own person outside of it. She has like, her own
She has,
quirks.
yeah, she has like a life. She has
She
a
doesn't exist for the
personality.
viewer, she exists for herself. That type of thing.
Mhm. Well, it's like, and that's why I like emphasizing certain things like yeah, I like putting her in like cute situations, but I also like the situations where she comes across as like a dork.
Yeah.
Like those are probably like my favorite things to draw.
Okay, so that's some insight. I never really like thought about it like, deeper than just like, oh hey, I like this character, she's fun. But
Mhm.
like now I get like a bit more of a sense for her. All right, hope that
Right,
answers the
and it's
question.
like, and I think like the fact that like I want her to work on multiple levels. Like if you just like her for just being fun, that's also fine.
Next up is Tuxedo Marcelo, Prince of Earth at
Hey,
Cyanoxa asks for Neil. What were some of the influences for your current art style? Are there any sort of things you tend to enjoy creating over others? That's a fun one.
okay, yeah. So I know like I mentioned this guy earlier. He was the guy who commissioned me that kind of got me off on this like tangent doing this weird fantasy comic I've been working on.
Hmm.
So I think as far as like current style, he's probably referring to like my weird fantasy stuff rather than like my pinup stuff.
Hmm.
But that is, it's like a weird combination because like there's certain like artists that I like draw on and I can tell like not even subconsciously, but I'm purposely trying to make my art look a little like theirs. Like there's this other guy who is featured in heavy metal a bit named Vaughn Bode. Vaughn Bode. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Is
Von Bode. Okay, got it.
yeah, yeah.
Bode. Yeah.
He's like this underground comic artist who kind of like came up around people like Robert Crumb and so on.
Got it.
But his characters have this like really like they're really squat and kind of chunky looking,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
his art is actually one of the biggest like claims to fame he has is that he's super influential to graffiti art, specifically with the way he does like word bubbles
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
lettering. And so it's like a lot of his characters appear in a lot of graffiti like all around the world.
Junk
But
waffle. Yeah.
like I think like I was like more specifically trying to channel him in the way that like he kind of lets like the white of the paper pop through a lot of his drawings.
I'm
Um,
trying to find examples of that right now. Because a lot of what I see is,
um,
oh no, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. I see
yeah,
this
like and
one
it's
like
like
illustration where like the Lizard of Oz
mhm,
that he's
mhm,
done, where like, they're walking on like, the yellow brick road, but there's like the hill is like made of white, like just
mhm,
of the paper, and the clouds are just, blues peeking out of the white to
yeah, yeah,
suggest that's actually really cool and inventive.
yeah. No, he's like he was a brilliant cartoonist, but so it's like kind of like more surface level channeling someone like him, but then meanwhile, a kind of like more because it's like I've been really wanting to try out more like abstract, like spontaneous mark making, kind of like a fine artsy kind of way of doing it.
Hmm.
And probably the artist that like inspired me the most to do that is Bill Sienkiewicz, which his last name is hard to spell, so I'll just put it in the I'll DM it. Yeah.
Yeah, please do, because I'm trying to type that up right now.
Okay. think if this doesn't if this isn't the correct spelling, it'll probably autocorrect it.
Yeah, I was not spelling that right at all.
It's one of those Polish last names that you're just like,
Yeah.
ugh.
Oh, this dude.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
So the way that most people know who this guy is in Spider-Verse, he's the guy who came up with like the reason why Kingpin is like a big just block of like black or is white or what his suit color was. Like the fact that he's just like this big massive shape was something Bill Sienkiewicz did.
oh, his Ghost Rider stuff is so cool.
But he brought this like abstract kind of expressionism or like impressionistic stuff to comic books in the like early 80s. And there's this one video he made where this one guy's like filming Bill drawing. And he's doing this like sketch of Elektra from Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing it all like straight to ink, like no sketch or anything. And then there's parts where he like makes mistakes, but it's like, well, it's an ink, he can't erase it or whatever. And then he just goes over it with like a white paint marker. So it's like he's kind of just adding. It's like he's never like subtracting from his drawing. He's never erasing. He's never undoing. He's always just adding on top.
I think that's a good exercise for people actually.
And it's like, and that's the way that like with like, I use Photoshop for everything I draw. But so it's like there's all these conveniences like undoing and erasing. But with this new style, I've been kind of like, no, I'm not gonna allow myself to do that. I'm just gonna paint on top instead. So it kind of creates this more like spontaneous look. So if I had to distill it down, those two artists would probably be the biggest influence on it. But even then, it's just, I know so many artists. Like I have a bookshelf of like 400 books next to me that I'm always like thumbing through and looking like at different things. So
I'm looking at the video right now. I've been like playing it as you were describing it, and it's just like it's kind of bizarre. The way how you like it's pretty much painting. I don't even consider this like inking.
Right.
At this
right,
point.
exactly.
And that's pretty cool. I like that.
Well, it's like I remember showing that video to a couple of my friends, and like once he busts out that like white paint marker,
Mhm.
it makes like the most awful like scratchy noise on his paper. But like my friend was just like, I love that. Like it sounds so like not precise. It just sounds like he's just like scribbling, kind of like a kid, and it's like it's great.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to me kind of trying to be like with this project, trying to be like uninhibited, like a child almost.
Okay. You're trying to I'm trying to put words to it. Escape from like what you're used to right now, like the business element of like your art or the commercial element of your art. Not to say that your art is like particularly commercial, but you're not trying to push for a product. You're trying to push for like, self-representation or like, not self-representation, but like, having fun with it, enjoying the process.
Back to that self-indulging. Yeah. I just want to self-indulge as much as I can with this thing. Because it's been like very freeing. So like, again, highly recommend if this, because it's like, this is also born out of like a style experiment. Like I don't usually work in this style, but it's like experimenting is like the best way to get rid of art block.
I hope that answers your question, Tuxedo Marcelo. Next up is Artman Kurt at Kurt or Kai on Twitter.
Yeah.
Kurt
I think
asks,
I saw his.
For Neil, hey Neil, longtime follower here. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to tell you that Elden Ring is getting DLC. Hope you're as excited for it as I am.
So this is one of my friends, and I feel like every time I'm in voice chat, like because it's kind of like an inside joke. So my roommate, who's also like my best friend, who I've known for like 12 years, the whole like 2 years or whatever leading up to Resident Evil 4 remake, I swear every single day he told me, "Hey Neil, you're remaking Resident Evil 4." So like I think like 10 chat sessions in a row or whatever, like to my friend, I'm just like, Hey, did you know they're making Elden Ring DLC?
That's a very funny joke. I love how he's like longtime follower here. Hope you're doing well. But that's funny. And then the next and last one is going to be from Pastel Fire at Frail Bulb on Twitter. Asks, okay, one, how's y'all's day going? So, how would you say your day's going? Good.
Pretty good, pretty good. Mm-hmm.
Anything of note that happened today that you want to share with the crowd?
Not really. And you made that joke about everyone taking, or you said something before we entered this about everyone taking naps on Sunday, and it's like I took a nap today.
Yeah, damn. What's with you nap takers? Because, like, you know, I was talking with my previous guest on here, Meet Geary, and, like,
Mhm.
just like before like the show started, and like, you know, I was complaining to her about like, why do people take naps all the time? And she was like, I'm a nap taker too, and I'm just like, damn, okay. And she was like, when was the last time you took a nap? And I told her I think maybe like I take 2 naps like every year,
Mm.
if that. But like, yeah.
So yeah, I took a nap and then got into this chat. So
Yeah.
pretty much.
I played Splatoon today. I got Splatoon 3 and I'm practicing right now because I want to get better at that game. But yeah. For Neil, Pastel asks, what's your favorite and least favorite food?
Favorite food might be, and granted, it's like this is with the stipulation that it has to be like well made, of course. Like not just anyone will do it. It has to be well made. Is like French onion soup.
Ooh, French onion
Might
soup. Like if it's
be my
really done
favorite.
well, it's like super good. Man, I'm hungry. I haven't had French onion soup in a long time.
Like with good bread over the top with like melted like Gruyere cheese.
Yep.
Oh, that's the best.
Anything you particularly dislike that you don't like eating?
I will avoid like mad eating black licorice. I hate black licorice. It's like
Interesting.
it tastes like toothpaste to me.
Interesting. I've never had like a big issue with like I mean a lot. I hear a lot of people dislike black licorice, but I've never understood why in particular. Then again, like my palate is just terrible. Well, not terrible, but like there's not much I won't eat. Is the thing.
Right. Yeah, I'm not picky. I'm not really picky.
Yeah, but there's
Detroit
that.
style pizza is also up there. I don't know if
As
you've
you
ever
like,
had Detroit style pizza, but
like food that you enjoy eating.
yes, I
Is it
love.
like very saucy pizza where like the sauce is on top?
Um, sometimes, but it's like square pizza usually,
Oh, got you. Yeah, no,
but with like kind of thin, crispy crust. It's very,
I like Detroit style pizza. It's very nice.
mhm.
Didn't what was it? Didn't like Little Caesar start in Detroit or something?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
That's like my little bit of Detroit trivia that I can like list off the top of my head. And I heard it
Yeah,
caused problems for the city or something. I don't know what.
it's done a lot of good, but there's certain things that are a little sketchy. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Next up, same questionnaire. Same questioner. What genre of
Well, like, what
games
is
do you prefer?
your favorite food, though?
What's my favorite food?
Yeah.
Who I answer this question like all the time for this questionnaire. Let me see. And it always changes because like I'm always in a different mood. Is the thing.
Hmm.
I think lately I've been like thinking about chicken vindaloo a lot. It's an Indian dish. It's like this
Oh, okay.
extremely spicy. Like I don't even think it's a curry. It's just like vindaloo is what it's called. It's loaded with spices. It's painful to like use the toilet afterwards, like just to take a leak. Like not no
Mm.
not even like you know, not even taking a dump. It's just like taking a piss hurts
Oh,
afterwards
wow.
for me in
Wow.
particular. But I love the
Mm.
spice. It's just too good.
Mhm.
But yeah, I like chicken vindaloo, and like what I don't like, boiled okra. That's pretty much it. I just don't like the
Oh,
texture. It's not even the taste, it's just the texture.
okay. Yeah, because I feel like more than any time, or like more than anything, if there's a food I don't particularly like, it's usually a texture thing.
Yeah.
Because like a bad texture can really make me like sick to my stomach.
Yeah. It's just like for bad texture, it's like you don't expect it to be like that, like going into your mouth. It's
Mm,
usually betrayal of like your senses in some way, but whatever.
yeah.
Next
Mhm.
up is, what genre of games do you prefer?
um, I think if there's a like, I think if there's a genre that I kind of go out of my way to try games in, it's probably Metroidvanias.
Okay.
But
Like Hollow Knight
but
and Guacamelee, that type of stuff.
yeah, but my favorite ones are probably Blasphemous and
Oh, Blasphemous
Axiom
was really
Verge.
cool.
And Axiom Verge is fantastic too.
I did not play Axiom Verge yet, but I
The
played.
music is amazing.
Oh, I've. Did I not play this? I think I played a demo of this. Was there a demo of this? Yeah. A long time ago, yeah, there was a demo of this. Yeah, I remember looking at this and being like, yeah, this is really cool.
Well, in the
Very
stories, it's
Geiger-esque, too.
yeah, and the story's this weird like sci-fi mind fucks type of story. Like what? Like it's hard to wrap your mind around, kind of thing.
Okay, I'll have to
Um,
get it and play it and just like go through it. I really like the aesthetic though.
hmm the coolest thing about that game. It's like it's all made by one guy. Like one guy did all the graphics, music, programming, everything.
Insane,
Like,
just like Cave Story, except way bigger in scale.
hmm but yeah, if I had to like fixate on a specific genre, it's probably that one. But like I do like survival horror games too, but when they're done
Mm-hmm.
right, which isn't very often.
Yeah,
Like most survival horror games kind of leave me wanting in some kind of way. Like I love the Silent Hill games like aesthetically. I think as games they're not the most engaging, which
hmm.
might be like some people might find a little blasphemous to say, but
I feel playing the Silent Hill games, the combat is very clunky, but I think it's in a way that like lends itself to the characters.
yeah, I think like sometimes that idea works and other times it doesn't. Like there are times where there's certain enemies that are just like, I'm not scared, I'm just really irritated. Like
It's
this is really
frustrating, yeah.
frustrating. Which is
There's
like, I feel like frustration is like the arch enemy of terror. Like once you're frustrated, I'm like, I'm just pissed off right now. I'm not scared. I'm
you
not
turn
freaked
into
out.
Ethan Winters in Resident Evil 8, and you're
Yeah.
just very angry at everything causing you distress. But
hmm
no, for me, I think in terms of genre of game, I think I lean towards ooh, beat 'em ups. I think I go towards beat 'em ups very, very heavily. We were talking about like art in games earlier, and I think like my favorite game studio personally is Vanillaware.
And what have they done again?
They've done Dragon's Crown, they've done Odin Sphere, they've done
Okay.
Aegis Rim, 13 Sentinels. They've done, I mean, like for me particularly, their beat 'em ups are like my favorite of all. Muramasa the Demon Blade is another one.
Yeah. Mhm.
Uh, Dragon's Crown is, I think, yeah, no, it's definitely my favorite beat 'em up of all time. I love beat 'em
Is
ups.
that the one where there's that like really big muscle, giant booby barbarian lady in it?
Yes, yes, Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's the sorceress there, and I love playing as a sorcerer. She's like one of like the characters I have most fun playing. There, it's just a very fun game. I highly recommend if people like
Mhm.
are able to get a group of friends to play this game with.
Oh yeah.
Servers
Well, it's
servers
like
are dead, but like
those character designs are so like over the top that I'm just like it's so fan servicey to like a ridiculous degree that I love that kind of character design.
the 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 studio is 70% artists.
hmm
Uh, and they have a lot of really good artists on there. I can't list any of them like off the top of my head right now because like they're all Japanese names that I haven't memorized. But
Mhm.
look at any one of their art books and it's just phenomenal.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it.
But yeah, and that's pretty much it. The last one was art inspirations that she asked, but I feel like we've like went through that like very often.
It's
But
like
like
the through line, the entire video. Yeah.
yeah, if you want like, you know, a couple that you just want to like close off like your biggest inspirations that you would say.
Um, I'd probably say that one of the artists I looked at the most, especially when it came to like trying to learn anatomy. Um, Big surprise, it's another heavy metal guy, but and this comes with like also a warning because like his work can get like his NSFW stuff can get like pretty graphic, like and nasty sometimes.
Okay,
But
Google, please do not kill me for YouTube. But yeah, continue. What's his name?
his name is Tonino. I'll message you his name, but his name is Tonino Liberatori. He's a Italian guy, as you can probably surmise. He's most famous for this character in heavy metal named Rank Xerox, who's like this android made out of like photocopier
Oh, I'm
parts.
looking at this like one picture of him with like the dude that's like just angered and hulked out at the moment.
Mm-hmm. But like he he might be like the best anatomist I've like ever seen. Like his knowledge of the human body is like unparalleled. And what I really appreciate about that, or what like it lends to his comic book work, is that his sense of violence is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like his stuff isn't overtly gory, but he doesn't really need to do that to make his violence look incredibly painful and realistic. It's
Oh,
kind
his
of
facial
disturbing.
expressions are like great. I'm looking at this one where he's pouring glue on top of this like I don't know what it is.
Yeah, his stuff's kind of weird also. So it's like half the stuff he draws, I'm like, I don't know what you're doing here, man.
Yeah, but like I can definitely see the anatomical, like, you know, the way how he displays tension. Like he's very good at tension.
Yeah, like I'll link you this one image if you want to pull it up on the screen or whatever. But like there's this picture he did of like a robot digging its claws into this guy's shoulder,
Yeah, yeah, I was just looking at that earlier.
and it's like it's not super gory, but you're like you can kind of feel like the thickness of his skin,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you're like that looks painful. Like that is horrible to look at. Even though it's not like there's not all this like viscera everywhere or whatever, but
He
you're
he
like,
kind he kind of reminds me of like from like the Soviet era Russian illustrators. Like the way how they
yeah,
like handle like specifically musculature.
mm-hmm. But he
Soviet.
has a similar background to you because like I know that he started out as an architecture guy, and he's really good at like putting like figures in a space.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that with his stuff. He's also very good at
Uh,
conveying like just energy.
mm-hmm. Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
tension in particular is like his strongest element.
yeah. And it's like, and I think like being a comic guy is what makes his art so cool to me. Is like you have these like hyper realistic artists, but they're usually their art is kind of like stiff or like superposed. Whereas it's like the
Mhm.
fact that he can draw like hyper realistic, but have these like crazy poses is just like really cool. But then if I wanted to shout out one last thing, because and I'm gonna also sound like a broken record here, but I recommend everyone watch Phil Tippett's Mad God. It's like, have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
So a little bit of background is Phil Tippett is this Hollywood special effects guy. Like he worked on the original Star Wars. He worked on RoboCop. He's like
Oh,
a
this definitely
mainly
looks like my jam. I'm not gonna be looking too much into the Google sheets because I don't want to get like anything in the movie like
spoiled.
visual
Yeah.
effects spoiled because like I saw one thing and I'm like, okay, no, this is really cool.
Um, but the reason why I wanted to shout out this movie in particular is because it's also like one of the biggest influences on my comic I've been working on. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like visually or whatever, but like this Mad God movie is like a miracle to me because it's so like I've never seen a movie that like feels so much like this is just someone's vision, like completely uncompromised. Like this is just what he wanted to make. And like everyone banded together to help him make it. And they're like you're I know people's enjoyment of the movie may vary because it might be one of the most disgusting movies I've ever seen. But it's just like this is the most like imaginative, like self-expression like filled movie I've ever seen.
When did it come out?
I think it came out like last year, but the thing that's like the cool story about it is that
It's been
he
going on for a
start,
long time. Yeah.
he started it in the late 80s, I
I've heard
think.
about this. I have heard about the story for this movie. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I think like the story goes that like he filmed part of it in the late 80s and then just had to like shelve the project, and then decades later one of his employees found the old footage and was like, Phil, what is this? Like let's bring this back. And then I think they've been crowdfunding it since like 2014, 15 or something. It's been a long time.
It's really yeah, I've definitely heard about this story. Like when once you mentioned that like this has been going on for a long time and it was a visual effects artist, like practical effects artist trying to helm this thing. I remember hearing about that. I think one of my previous guests actually mentioned it
Hmm.
at some point. Definitely something I need to
But
take a look at.
yeah, but it's just like one of those movies where it's like I can't recommend people watch it enough. Like I just want more people to see it. I don't care if they like it. I just want more people to see it.
Okay, well that's definitely next on my watch list.
Yeah, you'll have
This
to
was
tell me
going
what
to.
you think of it.
Yeah, I look at it like just purely like whatever the Google like image section showed me, and I already liked what I saw, so I'm just like
Mm-hmm.
okay, I feel like I'm like the type of person to like watch this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I also got another friend that I think would like it. I think he probably already saw it, but like yeah, I'll show it to him if he hasn't seen it already. Because like
Mm-hmm.
this feels like a particular type of person's like aesthetic and jam.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely mine.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's all the questions that we had for the night. Again, thank you for coming on tonight.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
And we've been at it for like this is the longest show we've had so far, over 3 hours and 40 minutes. But yeah,
Hey, you know.
time flies. I get it. But yeah,
Mm,
that has been Neil, everybody, at NDASFW on Twitter.com. You can find him at NDASFW on Newgrounds as well, where he has an archive of all of his like previous work, and it's just purely his artwork on Newgrounds. You don't need to like dig too deep for anything. But is there any other place where people can find you that you want to showcase?
um, I mean, like I have my own like website, but that's like my portfolio. It's just neildanderson.com.
Okay,
Um, but yeah, I do want to start uploading more to Newgrounds,
please do.
especially just with how volatile Twitter is.
Yeah,
But
please do that. At the very least, you can preserve everything in high quality on Newgrounds.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's been Neil, everybody. Thank you for coming, Neil. And this
Yeah,
has
thank
been
you.
Radio Graffiti. All right, everybody. It's way past midnight for us. And
Yep.
everybody should be going to sleep because it's Monday. Work starts soon. Adios, amigos.
All right. Bye bye.